Chapter 1176, Whereabouts of Demonic Servants. Translator, Cetulin. Editor, Cetulin. Yun's aura became richer the longer he fought. He began to realize that he had far underestimated the Azure Wood Divine Tree's strength. With it, he was practically invincible here. Especially as demonic servants lacked physical bodies, the Azure Wood Divine Tree was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. There was no way to stop it. Pang, pang, pang. Large swaths of demonic servants were slain by Yun. At the same time, Yun used his spatial dimension laws to distort space and imprison other large groups of demonic servants. However, a few had slipped away from Yun's restraints and begun fleeing out of the ruin. Damn it! Yun frowned. He knew that although the demonic servants were extremely weak and easily crushed by the Azure Wood Divine Tree, they were very difficult to deal with once they were out of the ruin. Few people could even see the demonic servants without the purple crystal's energy vision. And even if they could see them, they would still have a hard time dealing with them because they could possess the bodies of others. The spiritual bodies by themselves were not very strong, but if they were to possess a warrior, their strength would increase 100-fold. No matter how strong Yun was, he could not hold back an army of demonic servants that numbered in the thousands. By the time the spatial cage closed completely, more than half of the demonic servants had gotten out of the ruin. At that moment, outside the ruin, the guards from Jadewave sect were manning their posts. Due to the Yuan Qi fluctuation from before, they were still very tense. This place is just too odd. Staying here just makes me feel uncomfortable. Unfortunately, both you and I have to guard this place. If someone really were to trespass, they would probably die from fright. The guards looked in the direction of the ruins as they felt a chill run down their backs. Suddenly, they felt a strong gust of cold wind blow at them. It left their bones shaking. What's the matter? One of the guards had been blown into the air by the cold squall and slammed into a wall. At that moment, he felt as though all life had been sucked out of him. It was like he was immediately about to die. And at that instant, a resplendent glow burst out from the ruined seal as it blasted apart. Out stepped a youth that was covered in blue light. His face was a mystery, and when he raised his hand, a green sword beam appeared. Sha! The sword beam flashed across the guard's cheek, as though it was piercing through something. Immediately following that, the guard heard what seemed like a heart-wrenching cry. The voice seemed evanescent as though it had been issued from the abyss of hell. It left him shuddering in fear. Bam! The guard slammed heavily to the ground. He realized his back was completely soaked in cold sweat. Although he did not know what just happened, he was certain that he had a brush with death. He had been saved by that green sword beam, but who was the youth? Why was he walking out of the restraints that sealed the ancient ruin? His eyes widened as he stared at the youth, trying his best to make out his facial features. However, there seemed to be dense Dao patterns covering him that blocked his face. The more the guard tried, the more he couldn't make out anything. Inform your sect master to evacuate the entire Jadewave sect or a catastrophe will befall the sect. The youth's voice rang in the guard's ear. It caught the guard by surprise. The entire Jadewave sect had to evacuate or catastrophe would befall it? Although he knew that the mysterious youth was formidable, would the sect master believe this stranger's words? Just as he was about to inquire further, the youth transformed into a blue stream of light. In a blink of an eye, he had traversed the 100,000-foot valley and vanished. What do I do? Aside from the guard that had been sent flying, the other guards were feeling cold and clammy. They had a small suspicion that the cold wind could have been the escape of the cursed things from inside the ruin. As for the mysterious youth, who was he? Regardless, the sect master had to be informed of this matter. Ever since Dong Xiaowan had left with Yun, Jadewave sect's sect master Dong Xiaoqing had not left the Jadewave sect's premises. Although he trusted Yun, he still missed his daughter. These days, he had been fretting over the bounty on Yun's head. He was extremely worried for Yi Yun since the Myriad Immortal Pavilion was willing to pay a huge price to have him hunted down. The news had spread throughout the Myriad Divine Territory and even to several of the surrounding divine territories. Even 4 supremacies from Myriad Immortal Pavilion had been called in. However, it was as if Yi Yun had vanished into thin air. Dong Xiaoqing's only option was to wait. Unfortunately, before he managed to receive any news of Yi Yun, he received a report from his subordinates that something had happened in the ancient ruin in the World Stone Mine. A mysterious youth covered in blue light? Awakened evil spirits? What did that youth look like? Dong Xiaoqing eagerly asked. I couldn't tell. The guards shook their heads. There was light and laws blocking him. We couldn't see a thing. Is that so? Many thoughts instantly flashed through Dong Xiaoqing's mind. A youth with immense strength just happened to appear by the ancient ruin. The first person Dong Xiaoqing thought of was Yi Yun. Was it possible that Yi Yun learned the location of the ancient ruin from his daughter and went to investigate? Upon realizing that, Dong Xiaoqing took a deep breath. Yi Yun was truly talented and daring. Such a strange, cursed land with no rewards was somewhere people would avoid in fear, yet he took the initiative to investigate it? Regardless if it was Yi Yun or not, Dong Xiaoqing decided to keep the matter an absolute secret. If the Myriad Immortal Pavilion were to know of it, it would be troublesome. Listen up. News of today's incident, especially anything to do with that mysterious youth, must be a sworn secret. Any who tell will be dealt with according to the sect's rules, by death. Immediately make a soul contract. Also, immediately inform everyone in Jadewave sect that we are leaving this area. Are we really moving? The guards were dumbstruck. They thought that the sect master would not believe the mysterious warning. After all, the Jadewave sect had been entrenched in these lands for too long. These were their roots, so how could they move so easily? Yet, Dong Xiaoqing made this heavy decision within a few seconds. The spirit the sect master had was indeed massive. At the moment Dong Xiaoqing made his decision, thousands of miles away from Jadewave sect, Yi Yun was still pursuing the demonic servants with the pure Yang broken sword in hand. While these demonic servants fled from Yi Yun, they constantly spread out. However, the core batch remained clustered together. They were extremely fast, so fast that Yi Yun failed to close the gap. However, the longer he pursued them, the more Yi Yun's eyebrows furrowed. He would soon need to give up on his pursuit. Not because he could not deal with the demonic servants, but because they were heading for Myriad City. Myriad City had a ban on flying, but that did not matter to the demonic servants. Even supremacies would not detect them. However, if Yi Yun were to just fly in, he would definitely be stopped. Moreover, Myriad City was home to the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. Yi Yun had greatly offended the Myriad Immortal Pavilion, so entering Myriad City would be walking into a trap. Upon thinking of this, Yi Yun gradually slowed down. He gave up on pursuing the demonic servants for he had no choice. It was only a matter of time before the demonic servants eventually escaped. He had forced them to escape in a rush and had greatly reduced their numbers. That was all he could do. As for the rest, it would depend on Myriad City. He could not continue to be involved in the matter. If you find any errors, ads pop-up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know. Report chapter so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1177, Scheme. Translator, Citulin. Editor, Citulin. Myriad City did not have any curfews and warriors did not need much sleep. So, be it day or night, Myriad City was always bustling with activity. Lively chatter could be heard at all times, especially in the core of Myriad City. At that moment, one store in the core region of the city was being renovated. The original plaque had been taken off and thrown to the ground. On it were 3 words, Yun Xin Loft. A colorfully dressed youth who held a sword was stepping on the Yun character with one foot as he spat at the plaque. Move everything out. Leave the useful things behind and destroy the garbage. The youth said languidly. More than a dozen myriad Immortal Pavilion disciples had already rummaged through Yun Xin loft. They had taken all of the ordinary herbs and fey bones. As for the renovations that the store originally had, they were completely destroyed. They planned on redoing the interior to give it a brand new look. The Myriad Immortal Pavilion wasted no time in buying out Yun Xin loft. The colorfully dressed youth was the person assigned by the Myriad Immortal Pavilion to man Yun Xin loft. In Myriad City, being the general manager of a store in the Core City district was quite a great job. The annual pay was a sizable sum of money. With such riches, he could easily acquire cultivation resources, meaning his cultivation level would improve rapidly. Such a great opportunity could only be given to a core disciple. The colorfully dressed youth was indeed a core disciple of the Myriad Immortal Pavilion, Si Xiaoyu. Ever since Si Yusheng had his Dantian crippled by Yi Yun, his status as Pavilion Lord's successor was naturally gone. Si Yusheng was utterly despondent, locking himself in his room all day. He did not eat or drink, nor would he meet anyone. Then again, even if Si Yusheng wanted to meet anyone, he probably wouldn't be given the chance. People were pragmatic. When he was still high and mighty, countless people would fall over themselves for a chance to see him. But with him now a cripple, they treated him with scorn. Si Xiaoyu was actually rather happy about this. He had long been jealous of Si Yusheng, and now that Si Yusheng had been crippled, the chances of him becoming Myriad Immortal Pavilion's successor had increased a little. It was an extremely rare opportunity. Ah, Brother Xiaoyu, I wish you success in your business. At that moment, Zhou Baifeng walked over with a smile. Beside him was his distinguished guest, Zheng Ziyuan. Now that Yi Yun was being hunted by the Myriad Immortal Pavilion, Zhou Baifeng was very willing to lounge in safety while the others fight. He yearned for Yi Yun to be killed by the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. Hopefully. Although the store is a little small and out of the way, it is passable. Si Xiaoyu replied nonchalantly. Ha ha ha. Zhou Baifeng laughed out loudly. Brother Xiaoyu, you must be joking. For a store to be bigger than this or to have a better location, it would have to be the heaven-bestowing medicinal clinic or the medicinal immortal pavilion. Such a good store has now been given to you by the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. The amount you earn this year will be staggering. How would the elders not know that? They have tacitly agreed to this, which means that they are considering grooming you to become the Pavilion Lord's successor. As Zhou Baifeng said, he revealed a smile that was pregnant with meaning. Now that there was a vacancy for the role of successor, many people were eyeing the spot. Si Xiaoyu was indeed capable of getting it. Si Xiaoyu relished what Zhou Baifeng said. He said, if I can capture Yi Yun, my status as Pavilion Lord's successor will be secured. However, there has not been any news of Yi Yun at all. Yi Yun was an archenemy to the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. His talent was phenomenal and would lead to endless trouble if he was left alone. Speaking of Yi Yun, my goal is identical to Brother Xiaoyu's. I hate that little bastard as well. In fact, I have an idea that might lure the little bastard out. Oh? Tell me about it. Si Xiaoyu had his interest piqued. Brother Xiaoyu, I was there when Yi Yun fled. I noticed that, before he left, he looked City Lord Qin in the eye and seemed to transmit his voice to him. Over the past few days, City Lord Qin has been on a constant search for something. Oh? What is he looking for? Soul returning route. My guess is that the soul returning route is what Yi Yun wants. How did his grudge with Zhuqiu Haoyu start? It began when he went to the heaven-bestowing medicinal clinic to buy a soul-restoring relic but ended up being hindered by Zhuqiu Haoyu. I have looked into the matter. Back when Yi Yun wanted to buy the soul-restoring relic, he borrowed myriad runes from City Lord Qin. At heaven-bestowing medicinal clinic, he endured Zhuqiu Haoyu's insults without incident. But we both know that little bastard is not someone that can bear insult. So why did he stifle his anger that time? It has to be that the soul-restoring relic was extremely important to him. Later on, he could not tolerate the treatment that was given to him and finally revealed his true nature before leaving. Eventually, he failed to obtain the soul-restoring relic. But if it was so important, then how could he simply drop the matter? I think it's impossible. Perhaps, this resulted in a situation where he still needed a soul-returning route rectify the problem. So if we can find a soul-returning route, then perhaps we might be able to lure that punk out. After Zhou Baifeng aired his assumptions, Si Xiaoyu fell into a deep silence. Zhou Baifeng's analysis was indeed very probable. If that were the case, then the Myriad Immortal Pavilion could publicly put up a soul-returning route for sale, and Yi Yun might take the risk to purchase it. They would then be able to find Yi Yun. Although this method wasn't guaranteed success, it was better than stumbling around like a headless fly. Alright. I'll do it. Brother Baifeng, if this plan manages to draw out the little bastard, I will definitely remember your assistance. Si Xiaoyu's eyes glimmered. Ha ha ha. Brother Xiaoyu, there's no need for that. I too want that punk dead. Our goal is the same. Zhou Baifeng laughed out loud. If Yi Yun really was captured through such a method, he could resolve his grudge and also befriend Si Xiaoyu. If his plan also resulted in Si Xiaoyu being elevated to the position of Myriad Immortal Pavilion's successor, it would be an additional boon. Just as Zhou Baifeng was about to cheerfully laugh out, he suddenly had an odd feeling. Oh? Why did it suddenly get so cold? For no apparent reason, Zhou Baifeng felt a chill run down his back. It was like a cold wind had blown past him. It feels like it's a cold wind. Si Xiaoyu frowned slightly as well. There was apparently a cold gust of wind that seemed to reach deep into his bones. However, the duo looked around and did not notice anything odd. They were completely baffled. Perhaps it was just a gust of wind. This is the core district of Nereid City. There are many experts here. How could there be anything capable of hiding from so many people's perceptions? Both of us are worried for nothing. Ha ha ha, that's true. Then, Brother Xiaoyu, I shall bid you farewell. On the matter of the soul returning route, please pay close attention to it. Of course, although a soul returning route is hard to come by, it is not impossible if my Myriad Immortal Pavilion searches for it. Si Xiaoyu was very confident. The Myriad Immortal Pavilion was one of the core trading partners of the Yang God Emperor in Heaven. The Myriad Immortal Pavilion was also a mighty faction, so it was not difficult for it to find a single item. After Si Xiaoyu and Zhou Baifeng bade each other farewell, the former reported the matter to the Circle of Elders. Yi Yun was a mortal malady to the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. Although searching for a rare spirit herb like the soul returning route would be an expensive undertaking, the Circle of Elders agreed to it. The command was sent to all the branches of the Myriad Immortal Pavilion search for and immediately purchase a soul returning route. Chapter 1178, Exterminating the Demon. Translator, Citulin. Editor, Citulin. After abandoning his pursuit of the demonic servants, Yi Yun went straight back to the mountain valley lakeside. Sir is back. Ruer exclaimed happily when she saw Yi Yun's figure suddenly appear in the pavilion. Dong Xiaowan hurriedly came out of the house. Young master, why are you back so quickly? For Yi Yun to return so quickly, it was probably because he had noticed the strangeness of the ancient ruin and sensed its danger. It's good that you are back. Ruer and I were worried for you, said Dong Xiaowan. As for whether Yi Yun could gather any meaningful information from such a short investigation was of little importance. Yi Yun smiled slightly and said, I have found a way to resolve the curse of the ancient ruin. I will be entering seclusion for a few days. Xiaowan, prepare for it. Once I come out of seclusion, I will help rid you of your problem for good. With that said, Yi Yun walked back into the house. Dong Xiaowan was left standing in a daze. Her beautiful eyes were filled with disbelief. Yi Yun had spoken so nonchalantly, but it sent shocks reverberating within her. Not only had Yi Yun fully investigated the ancient ruin, he had also found a solution to the curse in such a short period of time? And also, Shawan, congratulations. You can finally be healed, thanks to Sir. Ruer said while happily grabbing Dong Shawan's hand. Dong Shawan still looked as though she were in a dream. Still in a daze, she nodded as the corners of her mouth slowly rose into a smile. That's right. I still wonder if I heard wrong. After returning to his room, Yi Yun sat on a bamboo bed and studied the azure wood divine tree within him. Having absorbed such a large number of demonic servants in the ancient ruin, he still had a large amount of energy within him that had yet to be fully digested by the azure wood divine tree. As for the demonic servant energy that the azure wood divine tree did absorb, it became lusher as a result. It was growing at a discernible pace. The azure wood divine tree's growth was connected to Yi Yun's growth. As he sensed the vibrant vitality of the azure wood divine tree, he couldn't help but feel refreshed. The demonic servants had been in slumber for an unknown period of time. If left untouched, they would have caused a catastrophe when they awoke by possessing the bodies of countless warriors. However, an unforeseen turn of events occurred when Yi Yun was able to obliterate them en masse. First I should enter seclusion to finish digesting the absorbed energy, then I can destroy the root of Dong Shawan's problem. Yi Yun breathed in lightly before gently closing his eyes. Immediately, a yuan qi fluctuation effused from his body. At the same time, a phantom image of the azure wood divine tree suddenly appeared behind him. The entire bamboo house was enveloped by a blue-tinted energy. The bamboo within the blue-colored energy that was dead or chopped off began to sprout. A near-endless amount of bamboo leaves began growing in Yi Yun's room. With his yuan qi fluctuation wavering, the rich aura even spread out of the bamboo house and enveloped the entire island in the middle of the lake. The spirit flowers planted on the island began budding before bursting into full bloom. The spirit grass also turned more luxuriant. The island was turned into a conglomeration of splendid and beautiful flowers with a fragrance that inundated the olfactory senses. This seclusion of his is truly miraculous. Even I find my body turning lighter. Ruer looked at the tightly shut door as she said wistfully. After Yi Yun entered seclusion, Dong Shawan had also begun hers. In order to prepare for her treatment, she wanted to get herself into peak condition. Now, in the bamboo house in the mountain valley lakeside, two people were in seclusion while another was in deep slumber. Ruer was the only one awake. She sat on the steps outside the house with her hands cupping her tiny face. She was watching the tiny flowers bloom by her feet with interest. This scene continued for several days. One day, a huge blue beam of light shot out from Yi Yun's room. The mountain valley lakeside, including all the vegetation in the mountain valley, instantly shook in response, as though prostrating in Yi Yun's direction. Creak! Yi Yun pushed the door open and walked out. After being in seclusion for a few days, his eyes seemed to contain a divine light. His skin appeared like beautiful jade and his disposition was otherworldly. He was like an immortal that came down from the heavens. The vegetation that was prostrating in Yi Yun's direction began bending their leaves as though they were bowing before a king. Ruer came running in joyful excitement, but immediately stopped when she saw Yi Yun. She nearly didn't recognize the figure before her as Yi Yun, but as an immortal that came from an alternate world with blooming flowers. Yi Yun sensed the changes within him and was satisfied. After he absorbed all the demonic servant's energy, the azurewood divine tree had grown another 10 feet. The 20-foot-tall tree was now 30 feet tall. The azurewood divine tree needed to absorb massive amounts of natural treasures to grow, but these demonic servants were in no way inferior to the natural treasures. When he thought of this, Yi Yun felt a tinge of disappointment. He only knew of the one ancient ruin, located at the Jadewave Sex World Stone Mine. There might be other ancient ruins he did not know of. If not, it doesn't help to bite off more than I can chew. I shouldn't think about such things right now. Yi Yun shook his head. The demonic servants were extremely peculiar. Most people would probably avoid them out of terror. If these demonic servants were to know that someone was taking the initiative to seek them out, and with such anticipation, who knows how they would feel? At that moment, Yi Yun had converged his aura. The luxuriant vital energies were hidden within his body. The plants resumed their normal behavior while Ruer finally snapped out of her daze. She looked perplexedly at Yi Yun and said, "Sir, currently you are." Although Yi Yun had converged his aura, his disposition remained elegant. It was a special feeling that he exuded. "We'll talk about that in a while." "Where's Shawan?" asked Yi Yun. "Young Master Yi." Another door opened as Dong Shawan stood beautifully by it and looked at Yi Yun. "Young Master, congratulations on a successful seclusion." Yi Yun nodded and said, "All right, it looks like you are done with your preparations. Let's not delay any further. We shall begin immediately. Ruer, stay outside and wait." The demonic servant was still rather sinister. Since Ruer lacked strength, Yi Yun was afraid of scaring her. "All right." Ruer nodded obediently. "Let us begin." Yi Yun entered Dong Shawan's room and said, "Lie down first." Dong Shawan obediently lay down on the bamboo bed as she looked at Yi Yun, who was standing by the bedside. "Guard your Yuan Qi and do not send it to your Dantian. Leave the rest to me," Yi Yun said as he gently placed his palm on Dong Shawan's abdomen. When he sensed her soft abdomen turn a little tense, Yi Yun glanced at her and whispered, "Don't be afraid." "All right." Dong Shawan's voice was as fine as a mosquito's hum. As she looked at Yi Yun's focused expression, she felt her ears turn somewhat warm. She had not only let Yi Yun into her boudoir, she was even lying in bed before him. In addition, Yi Yun's warm palm touched her through a thin layer of clothing. This was something Dong Shawan had never experienced before. Yi Yun's palm was pressed on where Dong Shawan's dantian was. He activated the purple crystal's energy vision and immediately saw the ghastly-faced demonic servant lurking in her dantian. The moment the demonic servant sensed Yi Yun, it immediately revealed a look of horror. By this point, Yi Yun had already absorbed a large number of its kind. The azurewood divine tree had grown 10 feet higher, so the fear it struck into the demonic servant was only more intense than before. "Ah!" The demonic servant let out an ear-piercing howl as it tried to escape deeper into Dong Shawan's dantian. "You still think of running?" Yi Yun pressed his palm down gently, injecting the azurewood divine tree's vital energies into Dong Shawan's dantian. The refreshing energy made Dong Shawan's body turn limp. She involuntarily made a low moan, but the energy was like an inferno to the demonic servant. Ah! The demonic servant could not bear the excruciating pain as it finally escaped out of the dantian, hoping to flee. However, it was imprisoned by a spatial cage that Yi Yun had already prepared. The demonic servant slammed around in the spatial cage. Because of this extreme situation, Dong Shawan could finally make out the demonic servant's existence. She immediately screamed, "It's time you die." Yi Yun looked coldly at the demonic servant. As the azurewood divine tree phantom flashed, the demonic servant immediately screamed as it was reduced to points of light. The Yuan Qi it turned into was completely absorbed by the azurewood divine tree. Upon seeing the demonic servant completely dissipate, Yi Yun's expression relaxed. He looked down at Dong Shawan and said with a smile, "It's over." Dong Shawan stared at Yi Yun with unblinking eyes. She had believed that it would be an endless and excruciating process, but it was over just like that. Chapter 1179, Plague. Translator, Sitalan Editor, Sitalan. With Dong Shawan completely cured, Yi Yun felt a load taken off his mind. He planned on continuing his seclusive cultivation in the coming days so as to solidify the results of the azurewood divine tree's growth. As for the danger of the demonic servants wreaking havoc after escaping to Myriad City, it was beyond Yi Yun's control. "I will need to enter seclusion for a period of time. Ruer, take good care of Sierre. Shawan, you can actually return to Jadewave sect. Your father must be very worried about you, said Yi Yun. He had already informed Dong Xiaowan that the Jadewave sect had moved. Dong Xiaowan shook her head. Young master, you just saved my life and now you are entering seclusion. Sister Sierra needs someone to take care of her, so how can I simply leave? I'll make that decision when you are done with your seclusion. Dong Xiaowan did wish to let her father know that she was cured as soon as possible. In order to save her, her father, Dong Xiaoqing, had gone to great lengths. Young master, I wish to send a message to my father to let him know that I'm safe and cured. I will not leak our location. Are you agreeable to that? Dong Xiaowan asked. Yi Yun nodded. He trusted Dong Xiaowan. The mountain valley he was currently hiding in was her personal lodge, after all. Go ahead and send the message, said Yi Yun. At once. Dong Xiaowan replied happily. She had an extremely secretive method of contacting her father. While Yi Yun was in seclusion, a strange illness began appearing in Myriad City. No one knew when it began, but the moment one was infected by it, they became unable to cultivate. No matter how much effort they put in, their cultivation level would not increase one bit. Furthermore, the strange illness was extremely selective. It only occurred in those with extraordinary talent and young warriors. Those who were mediocre or old were completely fine. These talented geniuses were at the stage in their lives when their strength had the greatest room to grow. Time was especially precious, but, after being infected by the strange illness, their cultivation levels did not improve at all no matter how much cultivation they did. Many treasures were used, but to no avail. It seemed like an incurable disease. Not only could they not cultivate, some even began to gradually weaken. Si Xiaoyu was one of them. After Si Yuxing was maimed, Si Xiaoyu had taken over Yi Yun's Yun Xian loft. He was on the crest of a wave, with a high likelihood of taking Si Yuxing's empty spot, becoming the Myriad Immortal Pavilion's successor. However, just as he was enjoying his newfound success, he suddenly realized that his cultivation level had come to a halt. He was in charge of the Yun Xian loft. When it reopened, he made large amounts of revenue every day. After he took his cut, he would purchase scores of cultivation pills. However, the massive amount of resources did not give him the benefits he had expected. In fact, his physique was gradually weakening. It left him in extreme panic. If this carried on, not only would he fail to become the successor, he would end up like Si Yuxing. He would fall off his pedestal and become a cripple that no one cared for. This thought was even more terrifying than death. Young master. A servant gingerly approached the door to Si Xiaoyu's room. For the past few days, Si Xiaoyu had shut himself in the room. He became irascible, and there was no shortage of maidservants that had been injured or crippled by him. What is it? Si Xiaoyu's extremely gloomy voice boomed from inside. The Zhou family's young master Baifeng is here, said the servant. Si Xiaoyu was sitting in his room, surrounded by all sorts of pills and medicine. His eyes were red. He constantly consumed medicine and cultivated, but his dantian was like a bottomless hole. No amount of medicine was effective. Under such circumstances, Si Xiaoyu had no intention to receive anyone. However, he remembered that Zhou Baifeng had offered the suggestion of luring Yi Yun out. His idea was reasonable enough that Si Xiaoyu had ordered the plan to be executed. What is he here for? Si Xiaoyu asked impatiently. Young Master Baifeng says that it's of great importance. He demands that I inform you. The servant felt sweat seeping out of his forehead. After a while, the door opened abruptly. Si Xiaoyu stood by the door as he said coldly, "Tell him to meet me in the guest hall." Yes. The servant stole a glance at Si Xiaoyu. For some reason, the young man in front of him looked terrible. There were dark circles under his eyes and his footsteps appeared weak. However, he was only a servant. He knew the price of a ready tongue, so he made sure to say absolutely nothing. Soon, the servant led Zhou Baifeng into the guest hall. When Zhou Baifeng saw Si Xiaoyu, he looked as if a suspicion had been confirmed. "Brother Xiaoyu, you must have heard of the plague, right?" Zhou Baifeng asked. "Of course I have. Too many geniuses had been inflicted by it. Now, the illness was deemed a plague by the people of the city. In a warrior's world, it was borderline impossible to have any plagues. Warriors were in great health, so how could they get sick? But now, the truth was out for everyone to see. There were those that believed that certain evil entities were running amok in Myriad City. I wonder if Brother Xiaoyu thought of Dong Xiaowan? This plague seems to share similarities with the illness that Dong Xiaowan was inflicted with some time ago, such as the symptom of not being able to cultivate. Also, the people that are contracting the illness now are like Dong Xiaowan. They are extremely talented genius warriors," said Zhou Baifeng. Si Xiaoyu's expression was ashen. He had long thought of Dong Xiaowan. Back then, Dong Xiaowan's father, who was the Jade Wave sect master, Dong Xiaoqing, sought out famous doctors from all over. Eventually, he sought Huyan Song to refine pills, spending all his money. In fact, during the public pill refinement, Zhuqiu Bo had given a similar pill to Dong Xiaowan. It wasn't effective at all. Only the pill refined by Yi Yun had a beneficial effect, said Zhou Baifeng. Si Xiaoyu said coldly, Brother Baifeng, go ahead and speak your mind. I heard that some factions are beginning to secretly search for Yi Yun. Their geniuses have been infected by the plague. Now, they have their sights on Yi Yun. Some have even gone to City Lord Qin to seek his help, said Zhou Baifeng. Brother Xiaoyu, is there any news on your side? If the Myriad Immortal Pavilion still seeks to capture Yi Yun, it might draw the ire of some factions. Si Xiaoyu glanced at Zhou Baifeng and revealed a sneer. From the looks of it, Brother Baifeng is also ill? Why do you say these things? Are you thinking of getting Yi Yun to heal you? Unfortunately for me, the Myriad Immortal Pavilion has a contentious relationship with Yi Yun. Why would he agree to treat me? Of course, it doesn't matter if he's willing in the end. When we capture him, he will have no choice. Si Xiaoyu clenched his fists. His red eyes turned redder from the blood flushing to them. Zhou Baifeng shook his head with a somewhat wry expression. He had indeed fallen ill, if not, he would not have come looking for Si Xiaoyu. No one knew that Dong Xiaowan's illness was the beginning of a plague. Noticing how Zhou Baifeng seemed to be wavering, Si Xiaoyu said coldly, Why? Is Brother Baifeng thinking of changing his mind? Are you hoping to ingratiate him so that he will treat your illness? About that. Zhou Baifeng forced a laugh. Brother Xiaoyu, you are overthinking things. In truth, Zhou Baifeng had given the problem much consideration. His grudge with Yi Yun was not at the point of irreconciliation. If he gave some treasures and apologized sincerely, then perhaps Yi Yun would be willing to forgive him. He. Si Xiaoyu chuckled insidiously. Do you think that without you, I won't be able to accomplish something great? Furthermore, don't just believe that Yi Yun really has the means to deal with this strange illness. Back then, he was only able to temporarily awaken Dong Xiaowan. That punk even said that Dong Xiaowan was not fully healed. He too lacked the means to treat the problem at its root. All he did was refine a few Supreme Palace Ice Heart pills that treated the side effects but not the underlying cause. Brother Baifeng, I think you are seeking medical help out of sheer panic. Humph. Si Xiaoyu did not believe that the plague could be resolved by Yi Yun. So many geniuses from various factions had fallen ill, yet none of their seniors could figure out the solution. Yi Yun was just a junior like him, so how could he possess such an ability? However, once he captured Yi Yun, he could force him to refine the Supreme Palace Ice Heart pills of superior quality. It might not cure him, but it would temporarily slow down the effects of the strange illness. During that grace period, he would have more time to seek a permanent solution. Brother Xiaoyu is right. However, this can't carry on forever. The time we have is extremely precious. If we delay for even a few years, we will waste our potential, effectively crippling the rest of our lives. Upon hearing Zhou Baifeng's words, Si Xiaoyu's eyes shimmered. He said, "The myriad immortal pavilion's circle of elders have decided to hold a grand meeting of alchemists and doctors. An astronomical price will be offered to any alchemist or doctor that can treat the plague. The invitations have already been sent to the alchemists. In a few short months, there will be a grand event of unprecedented scale held in Myriad City. I refuse to believe that the combined efforts of this world's best alchemists and doctors will fail. It's just a matter of time." "Oh? There will be such an event? That's great." When Zhou Baifeng heard that, he finally felt relieved. He could be at ease knowing that the Myriad Immortal Pavilion was coming forward and spending large amounts of resources to solve the issue. Solutions were definitely possible with the collective efforts of the entire city. Chapter 1180, Grand Alchemical Cum Medical Meet. Translator, Situlin. Editor, Situlin. A few months later. In the vibrant mountain valley, a tiny stream meandered down from the mountain peak. Beside the stream were luxuriant green grasses with tender leaves. They swayed with the gentle breeze as drops of morning dew dripped down the ends of the grass blades. At that moment, a girl with hair that reached her waist was fetching water from the stream. She was dressed simply in an outfit that was dotted with flowers. She was holding up the leggings of her pants, revealing her fair calves that were covered in water droplets. She was truly the picture of a washermaid from a farming household. That young girl was none other than Dong Xiaowan. Over the past few months, she had been meticulously taking care of Ling Xier and keeping everything in the mountain valley in good order. Suddenly, a faint aura glided over her. Beside Dong Xiaowan's naked feet, the green grass rapidly grew as a result of the aura, working hard to extend its tender leaves. Even the stream appeared to be a lot happier. The sound of the water flow seemed to resemble a pleasant tune. Dong Xiaowan's heart stirred as she turned back to look. She saw that Yi Yun was standing not too far behind her. He had just walked out of the house, which was still immersed in a lush green brilliance. "Young master, you have finally come out of seclusion." "Yes, my cultivation level improved slightly. I gained some new insights, so I came out." "Young master, everything is well with Xier." Dong Xiaowan was pleasantly surprised, but she did not forget the mission Yi Yun gave her. "Young Master Yi, there is something I need to tell you. A few days ago, my father sent me a message." "Oh? What is it?" Yi Yun knew that it was definitely not easy for Dong Xiaowan and Dong Xiaoqing to communicate. To transmit information across such great distances to such a precise location definitely came at a cost. Therefore, they would not communicate unless it was something important. "It's this. There has been a major outbreak of a plague in Myriad City. Many people have contracted a strange illness that resembles the one you cured me of. Their initial symptom is being unable to cultivate. As time goes on, a small number of people begin turning weaker. And those infected have all been young geniuses." "Oh?" Yi Yun's brows pricked up as he sighed slightly. It must have been the evil entities he was pursuing. After they fled into Myriad City, they began wreaking havoc. These evil entities needed to use living bodies for nourishment before they could be reborn. And the best candidates were obviously young geniuses. Warriors of the older generation were not easily possessed due to their strength. Furthermore, their physical performance had drastically decreased. They were naturally unlike young geniuses, who had limitless potential. "I wonder how Princess White Fox is faring." Yi Yun was somewhat worried. Of all the young geniuses in Myriad City, Yi Yun was only concerned with Princess White Fox. If she had fallen ill, he would not turn a blind eye. "Young master, in addition, the Myriad Immortal Pavilion will be holding a grand alchemical cum medical meet with experts from several divine territories. It was supposed to be held this month, but for various reasons it has been postponed by another 2 months. My father said that the Myriad Immortal Pavilion spent almost half a year organizing the meet. It can be said that they have made sufficient preparations. Also, they have gathered several natural treasures as rewards. Okay. Yi Yun nodded. It was certain that many geniuses of the Myriad Immortal Pavilion had fallen prey to the evil entities. It had already lost 2 geniuses because of him. If the rest were to be crippled by the plague, the Myriad Immortal Pavilion would be completely out of young talent to replace the old. Now, the Guiyuan family was catching up to the Myriad Immortal Pavilion in terms of status. It was likely that the Myriad Immortal Pavilion was forming the meet to resolve the plague. What sort of rewards are there? Yi Yun casually asked. He didn't think too much of it, but as Dong Xiaowan began listing the rewards, Yi Yun felt a jolt through his heart. Soul returning route. Yes. Dong Xiaowan was taken aback. She never expected Yi Yun to have such a huge reaction after hearing the words soul returning route. Is this herb very important to you? Yes. Yi Yun took a deep breath and nodded. He had come to the Myriad Divine Territory in order to refine hollow soul pills. However, when Ling Xier's soul suddenly and heavily weakened, he ended up having to use half of his soul returning root that was the main ingredient for hollow soul pills. Now, with the Myriad Immortal Pavilion offering a soul returning root, how could Yi Yun not be tempted by it? However, the matter reeked of suspicion. The soul returning root was an extremely rare natural treasure. It only grew in netherworlds under the auspices of the heavens and earth. It would absorb the purine gases within the netherworld over tens of millions of years before taking form. It was nearly impossible to find a fresh one on short notice. If one needed it urgently, one had to buy it off someone else. Naturally, the price would be extremely high. A soul returning root was extremely valuable, but its uses were limited in scope. It could only nurture the soul or heal injuries related to the soul. It was priceless when there was a need for it, but of no use when there was no immediate need for it. Most alchemists would favor natural treasures that could directly raise one's cultivation level. They were evergreen treasures, which would make them suitable as a reward for the grand alchemical cum medical meet. Why would a rare but not often needed soul returning root be used as a reward? Furthermore, he had a great need for one. How could it be a coincidence? Could this offer be targeted at him? Upon thinking of this, Yi Yun's expression sunk slightly. Before he left, he had transmitted his voice to City Lord Qin to search for a soul returning route. Although City Lord Qin was formidable in strength, he was only one man. He needed to rely on his social connections to search for items. As such, how could he be comparable to the Myriad Immortal Pavilion that had done business in Myriad Divine Territory since time immemorial? Could it be that City Lord Qin's search for the soul returning route caused the Myriad Immortal Pavilion to make the connection that Yi Yun needed the soul returning route? Or perhaps, his desperation to buy a soul restoring relic had given the Myriad Immortal Pavilion certain ideas. Yi Yun instantly thought of many possibilities. It was absolutely impossible that the appearance of the soul returning route as one of the rewards of the meet was a coincidence. It was very likely aimed at him. The Myriad Immortal Pavilion was attempting to lure him out. It was a trap, but one that Yi Yun could not ignore. Furthermore, other than the soul returning route, Yi Yun was still concerned about Princess White Fox, Shui Wuxia. Although the evil spirits that laid in slumber would have awakened sooner or later, it was Yi Yun who caused them to prematurely enter Myriad City and wreak havoc. In addition, Yi Yun was indebted to Shui Wuxia, so regardless of the matter, he needed to ensure that she was safe and sound. It looks like I will need to attend the Grand Alchemical cum Medical meet. Young master, you want to go? But the Myriad Immortal Pavilion has offered lots of rewards for your capture. Everyone is looking for you. Dong Xiaowan turned a little anxious when she heard what Yi Yun said. That I naturally know. But since I dare to go, I definitely have my confidence. A strange glimmer flashed in Yun's eyes. Since the myriad immortal pavilion had produced the soul returning route to lure him to the grand alchemical cum medical meet, he decided to accept their invitation and take the soul returning route back. Shawan, make preparations to go to Myriad City with me.
Ah? I'm going too?
Dong Shawan was taken aback. Yes, both you and Ruhr. Move Sierra into the God Advent Tower and the both of you can care for her inside it. Leave the rest to me.
Chapter 1181, Guiyuan Family.
Translator, Situlin Editor, Situlin. In the northwestern corner of Myriad City, a broad granite road extended out. At the end of the granite road stood a magnificent manor. The manor covered an area of 5 kilometers. Erected by the door were 2 30-foot-tall bronze lions that looked extremely mighty. On a cursory glance, it looked like a king's residence in the mortal world.
But in fact, this manor was where the second biggest faction in Myriad City, the Guiyuan family, resided. A dexterous horse carriage stopped in front of the Guiyuan family's door. As the curtain was pulled open, a maidservant walked out and said, "Miss, we are here."
"All right." A faint female voice rang out as a girl in purple walked out of the carriage. She was none other than Fairy Purple Rain of the Guiyuan family, who lived a charmed life. "Miss, is your body feeling better?" the maidservant asked with concern. Fairy Purple Rain had been infected by the mysterious illness for several months. Fairy Purple Rain shook her head. "I'm fine." Fairy Purple Rain supported herself by holding onto a railing while she descended from the carriage. Although she claimed to be fine, her face was drained of its color. She exuded an extremely frail feeling. The plague was widespread, but only geniuses contracted it. As the top genius of the Guiyuan family, she naturally did not escape it. After Fairy Purple Rain contracted the illness, her body began to weaken within a few months. It was discovered that more talented people succumbed to the illness faster. Their bodies would also weaken even faster. As for those that weren't so talented, the illness only made cultivation ineffective. It did not affect their vitality or lifeblood. There was no need to elaborate on Fairy Purple Rain's talent. The illness caused her to rapidly lose her vibrancy. The Guiyuan family sought many doctors to examine Fairy Purple Rain, but no one found a cure. It even advanced to the point where the patriarch of the Guiyuan family personally examined Fairy Purple Rain's dantian. He determined that the strange illness was the result of infiltration by an evil spirit. Many people were astounded by the cause of the illness. Typically, the cure for the infiltration of an evil spirit was to vanquish the evil spirit. However, despite realizing the presence of the evil spirit, the Guiyuan family's patriarch was helpless, for he also learned that the evil spirit had entrenched itself in Fairy Purple Rain's dantian, fusing with it. Simply destroying the evil spirit wouldn't be difficult. What would be difficult was vanquishing the evil spirit without causing harm to Fairy Purple Rain's dantian. If vanquishing the spirit resulted in the dantian being destroyed, it was better not to save her. As such, the illness continued dragging on as they sought for a more medical solution. Despite claiming to be fine, Fairy Purple Rain watched herself get weaker by the day. Inwardly, she suffered from an ever-growing anxiety. For a blessed daughter of the heavens to suddenly be inflicted by a calamity, it was not only a waste of valuable cultivation time, but it was even possible that she would die young. How could the proud Fairy Purple Rain be willing to accept such a tragic outcome? Fairy Purple Rain had already sent people to search for Yun. In all of Myriad City, only Yun had managed to awaken the ill Dong Shawan. Even though Yun was unable to cure the problem at its root, he was at least able to relieve the symptoms. That was pretty much her only wish at present. However, it had been months and Yun seemed to have evaporated into thin air. There was no sight of him. Fairy Purple Rain knew that the Myriad Immortal Pavilion was about to hold a grand alchemical cum medical meet, but none could say for certain if the gathered alchemists and doctors would be able to find a cure. The only one who surely knew how to lessen the effects of the illness was Yi Yun, but he could not be found. "Miss, fourth elder has found a doctor who wants to examine you. He invites you over." At that moment, an old steward from Guiyuan Manor walked forward and said this. "A doctor." Fairy Purple Rain sighed. Fourth elder was her grandfather. He was naturally worried over her condition. In fact, she was not the only one that had fallen ill in the Guiyuan family. Many of the juniors in the family with passable talent had also fallen ill. Over the past few months, even if Fairy Purple Rain had not seen 100 doctors, she had definitely seen dozens of them. They came in all sorts of shapes and sizes. Some had thick bushy beards, but not one of them had a solution. "I don't feel like meeting them," Fairy Purple Rain said with flagging interest. She no longer held any hope. Some of these doctors had cultivation levels that were barely at the Dao Palace realm and were inferior to her. How could such doctors figure out anything? Fourth elder made it a point to say that this doctor's skills are extraordinary. "Miss, he strongly requests your attendance." With the steward being so insistent, Fairy Purple Rain reluctantly nodded. She knew that her grandfather was feeling anxious, which was a product of his good intentions. She could only cooperate and hope that it would be of some use. Fairy Purple Rain followed the steward out the main door and, after crossing a winding bridge across the lake, she came to a side hall in the back garden. Few people came to the side garden, and it was extremely well hidden. Fairy Purple Rain was somewhat puzzled. She never expected the meeting to occur in such a place. "Grandpa." Fairy Purple Rain gave fourth elder a bow when she saw him. "Purple Rain, you have come. Have a seat." Fourth elder pointed to a chair beside him. On his other side was a youth in azure-colored clothes. He looked entirely ordinary and indistinguishable. Even in front of her important grandfather, he sat on the chair in a composed manner. Fairy Purple Rain was startled. Looking at the positions of the three chairs, she finally realized the youth's identity. "Don't tell me that you are the doctor?" Fairy Purple Rain was rendered speechless. The youth did not look much older than she was. Even if he had taken youth retention pills, he would not look that young. Typically, youth retention pills only allowed one to maintain the looks of a young adult to a middle-aged adult. The youth in front of her looked more like a 16-year-old mortal. The youth glanced at her. At that moment, fourth elder said excitedly, this youth happened to encounter a junior that was ill. He could tell the cause of the illness at a glance. It was identical to what Patriarch said. When their Patriarch figured out the cause of the illness, they naturally did not advertise his findings. The other factions, such as the Zhou family or the Myriad Immortal Pavilion, had probably figured out the cause as well, but they too chose to keep it under wraps. For this youth to figure it out himself, and furthermore, with a glance, left fourth elder somewhat filled with excitement. He figured out the cause of the illness? Fairy Purple Rain was somewhat surprised, but she was hardly enlivened. Simply figuring out the cause of the illness without being able to resolve it was completely useless. She already knew of the cause, but her body remained ill. "Fairy Purple Rain, we meet again." The youth smiled gently and spoke. His voice sounded familiar to Fairy Purple Rain. Fairy Purple Rain was taken aback as she looked suspiciously at the youth. "You?" At that moment, Fairy Purple Rain saw the youth's deep but bright eyes. She found his disposition even more familiar as she suddenly stood up and said, "You are Yi Yun." Fairy Purple Rain does have great discernment. Yi Yun did not deny it. He had used the Star Transference Heaven-Changing Book to change his appearance before coming to Myriad City. At the city entrance, he had seen a notice posted by the Guiyuan family that stated they were hiring a doctor. He had taken the request. Yi Yun had no intention of hiding his identity in front of the Guiyuan family. Although he had used the Star Transference Heaven-Changing Book, his voice remained the same.
He did not deliberately conceal himself, or Fairy Purple Rain would have never identified him. What? You are Yi Yun? Fourth Elder was taken aback as well. Although the Guiyuan family had been searching for Yi Yun constantly and secretly, he never expected that Yi Yun would willingly come to Myriad City while the Myriad Immortal Pavilion was going to great trouble to capture him. Furthermore, he had fooled everyone with a disguise technique. Despite being at the beginning stages of a supremacy, he had failed to see through the technique. Such a disguise technique was overtly powerful. However, upon careful reflection, Yi Yun himself had the strength of a supremacy. Having a disguise technique that fooled other supremacies was not too surprising. Perhaps only figures like City Lord Qin or the Myriad Immortal Pavilion's Grand Elder would be able to see the flaws in Yi Yun's disguise. However, the number of people in Myriad Divine Territory that were at that level could be counted on one hand. How could they be sent by the Myriad Immortal Pavilion to hunt down Yi Yun? Fourth Elder suddenly understood that the Myriad Immortal Pavilion had probably provoked an enemy it should never have provoked. Young Master Yi, why did you come to our Guiyuan Manor today? Chapter 1182, What is Arrogance? Translator, Citulin Editor, Citulin. Fourth Elder looked at Yi Yun with a penetrating gaze. As an elder of the Guiyuan family, he had always enjoyed an overpowering aura. In front of typical juniors, they would feel dominated by his aura. Fairy Purple Rain was no exception. Even though she was an elite of the Guiyuan family, she remained a respectful junior in front of him. However, Yi Yun had appeared in Myriad City even though he was being hunted by the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. It was as though he had walked into a tiger's den. No one expected a disguised him to, despite such circumstances, to accept the Guiyuan family's public request, openly step into the Guiyuan family, and reveal his identity. Despite such unfavorable conditions, he still remained composed as though he was not being overshadowed by Fourth Elder's aura. This displeased Fourth Elder. He was, after all, a person of authority and was accustomed to being in control of everything. Yi Yun, you do know that with one voice transmission charm, people from the Myriad Immortal Pavilion would rush here in 5 minutes and capture you. When that happens, there is no need for me to describe your outcome. Fourth Elder was acutely aware that Yi Yun was not much weaker than he was. Since his aura could not overpower the junior, he went straight to the point. He wanted to sense an inkling of unease from Yi Yun's eyes. However, he was disappointed as Yi Yun laughed and said, I naturally know that. However, why would Fourth Elder want to inform the Myriad Immortal Pavilion? Are you tempted by that bit of reward offered by the Myriad Immortal Pavilion? Fourth Elder sneered. That is no bit of reward. For you, the Myriad Immortal Pavilion has gone to great lengths. The astronomical rewards offered is something even my Guiyuan family would covet. Yi Yun shook his head and said, Fourth Elder, is that all you can amount to? I previously heard from Shaowan that the Guiyuan family in the past 1,000,000 years has been the second strongest faction in Myriad Divine Territory. And in fact, in terms of strength, the Guiyuan family is not much weaker than the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. However, of the 3 great medicinal clinics in Myriad City's core district area, the Myriad Immortal Pavilion controls the Medicinal Immortal Pavilion, and the other heaven-bestowing medicinal clinic is jointly run by the Myriad Immortal Pavilion and several other factions. As for the Guiyuan family, it has no medicinal clinics in the core district of Myriad City. All it has is a weapon store. After all these years, the Guiyuan family has had unknown amounts of resources robbed by the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. Doesn't Fourth Elder feel any hatred for that? Now that the Myriad Immortal Pavilion is pursuing me, they are only taking out a portion of the resources that they had robbed from the Guiyuan family as a form of reward you claim to be astronomical. Is Fourth Elder so easily tempted by this tiny bit of benefit? From my point of view, these are things the Myriad Immortal Pavilion had snatched from the Guiyuan family and they are just returning it to the Guiyuan family out of charity. When Yi Yun came to this point, Fourth Elder's eyes flashed. His aura rose. What a glib tongue. It's a great strategy trying to sow discord.
It is not a lie that my Guiyuan family has been at odds with the Myriad Immortal Pavilion for millions of years.
How can the cost-benefit analysis not be done by the upper echelons of our Guiyuan family? How can it be something a junior like you can frivolously comment on?
You are just thinking of instigating a war between my Guiyuan family and the Myriad Immortal Pavilion so as to reap the benefits of the internecine outcome.
Fourth Elder's words were overbearing and they contained a powerful aura. It left Fairy Purple Rain stifled.
She knew her grandfather's character. He was a person with his own opinions, or he would not have risen to the position of elder.
Such a person wouldn't be so easily swayed by others.
For some reason, Fairy Purple Rain began to worry for Yi Yun. She felt that if she were in Yi Yun's shoes, she had no way of making a retort.
Yi Yun did not mind Fourth Elder's anger. He casually picked up the tea on the table and took a sip.
Fourth Elder is right. I have indeed frivolously commented on the relationship between the two of you.
However, you said that I'm trying to reap the benefits of an internecine outcome?
To be honest, a tiny place like the Myriad Divine Territory might be the core trading area of the Yang God Emperor in heaven, but to me, Yi Yun, it's not something I care for. My ambition does not lie here.
In a few years, I will leave the Myriad Divine Territory, so why would I try to reap the benefits of an internecine outcome?
You?
Fourth Elder's eyes widened. What arrogance! He had seen many young geniuses in his life. People like Si Yuxing and Si Xiaoyu were famous for their arrogance, for they thought nothing of others. Si Yuxing even dared to kidnap City Lord Qin's youngest son. What else did he not dare do?
But even an arrogant Si Yuxing's life goal was to inherit the Myriad Immortal Pavilion and lead the Myriad Immortal Pavilion into dominating the Myriad Divine Territory before expanding beyond the area.
Only Yi Yun dared claim that the tiny place like the Myriad Divine Territory was not something he cared for.
In comparison, Si Yuxing's arrogance was nothing. Fourth Elder wanted to rebuke Yi Yun for his arrogance, but he swallowed his words when it reached the tip of his tongue.
On careful thought, what did Yi Yun do in the past?
He had modified and refined Supreme Palace Ice Heart pills that exceeded Zhuqiubo's in quality. Despite knowing that Zhuqiuhaoyu was a young master of the Myriad Immortal Pavilion, he had still crippled him of his arms. Following that, when City Lord Qin's youngest was in Si Yuxing's hands, he had taken the initiative to relieve himself from City Lord Qin's protection. Everyone believed that he would be brought to the Myriad Immortal Pavilion and become a puppet in the future, but he had easily defeated Si Yuxing, who had cultivated for hundreds of years and was deemed to be invincible against anyone below the realm of supremacy.
His status as successor to the Myriad Immortal Pavilion was ignored as his Dantian was directly destroyed. He had also directly withstood a strike from a supremacy, Zhuqiubo, and did not suffer defeat.
He had managed to escape unscathed. Such a figure would definitely become a divine lord in the future if he did not perish. It was certain that he would become an alchemist sage, or it was even possible for him to touch the legendary gates that stood above the realm of a divine lord. He truly had the right to say that he thought nothing of the Myriad Divine Territory. The more carefully he thought, Fourth Elder realized the horror of the youth that was slowly sipping his tea.
Now, it would be considered good that his aura was not overpowered by Yi Yun, much less talk about overshadowing him.
I admit that among all that I had seen, I should say that you are the most terrifying genius that I have heard or imagined among all geniuses. However, it is impossible to make my Guiyuan family fall into a trap by instigating the conflict between the Myriad Immortal Pavilion and my Guiyuan family based on what you said. Furthermore, indulging an enemy is only asking for trouble. Even if you think nothing of the Myriad Divine Territory, my Guiyuan family will not be willing to cooperate with someone that can easily control us in the future.
To be honest, to such people like you, the first reaction most factions would have is fear.
From there, they will think of destroying you.
Fourth Elder was frank. Yi Yun nodded. I like it when people go straight to the point.
That's right. I naturally know that many factions will relish in my death.
However, how can I be easily destroyed having matured to this point?
Yi Yun, have faced factions even stronger than the Myriad Immortal Pavilion in the past. I have even faced the relentless pursuits of several divine lords alone. I have experienced even more dangerous circumstances. It might sound unbelievable, but I can swear on my Dao heart that I have not lied at all. Now, I am still living fine. The Myriad Immortal Pavilion is still far from capable of destroying me. Fourth Elder's heart leaped when he heard Yi Yun casually say those words. What? He had survived the relentless pursuit of several divine lords in the past? Fairy Purple Rain, who was standing beside him, gaped her tiny mouth. She found it unbelievable. However, ignoring the fact that Yi Yun had sworn, even if he didn't, Fairy Purple Rain was inclined to believe him. He was a person that defied the heavens. His alchemical and martial talent was already unbelievable. What was so surprising about a few more unbelievable feats? The Myriad Immortal Pavilion was powerful, but it was nothing compared to the collective efforts of a few divine lords. Yi Yun placed his teacup down and said, Fourth Elder, have you thought about it? Since Yi Yun have already left Myriad City, I could have gone afar to a neighboring divine territory. There, no matter how capable the Myriad Immortal Pavilion is, it would not be able to pose a threat to me. However, I have returned. I'm not someone willing to take things lying down. It's fine if the enemy is too strong, but as long as the enemy is not too powerful that I'm unable to put up a struggle, I will let them have a taste of their own medicine in the shortest amount of time. I never leave my grudges to the future. That is my character. You want to seek revenge on the Myriad Immortal Pavilion? Fourth Elder was taken aback. There was no end to Yi Yun's arrogance, only more arrogance. Si Xiaoyu or Si Yuxing appeared to be arrogant people on the surface. They would act as if they were the most arrogant person in the world, but what meant true arrogance? A person like Yi Yun, who seemed to keep a low profile on the surface, would not say a thing, but his heart was something nothing in the entire 12 Empyrean heavens could satisfy. That was true arrogance. What right do you have to seek revenge on the Myriad Immortal Pavilion? According to what I know, you only have strength equivalent to the beginning stages of a supremacy. Against the Myriad Immortal Pavilion, you are only making an ambitious attempt without any sense of your pitiable limitation. Naturally. Yi Yun nodded. I lack that strength, but I can develop allies. Ha ha ha. Fourth Elder laughed. So, you still intend to use my Guiyuan family as the vanguard? Why would my Guiyuan family listen to you? Fourth Elder, there is one thing wrong about what you said. It's not limited to the Guiyuan family. When Yi Yun said this, he came to a pause. There will be at least City Lord Qin. Other than that, I will also seek the Paradise chapter. Through the alliance of several factions, that should be enough. As for what right I have, firstly, it stems from my illustrious future. I will sign a contract of non-animosity with any faction that cooperates with me. It will last forever as long as I don't perish. Having a powerful ally in the future is always something worth rejoicing about. As for the second reason, Yi Yun came to a pause and turned his head to Fairy Purple Rain. He smiled and said, What if I were to say that I can cure Fairy Purple Rain of her illness? What? Fairy Purple Rain subconsciously took a step back. She covered her mouth. Having been ill for so long, her body was turning weaker. Even though she claimed to be fine, she was feeling terrible. At times, she would feel a sense of despair late into the night. She had thought of the numerous outcomes that would happen if there was no cure to the plague countless times. She would turn into a complete cripple or have her body possessed by the evil entity within her. Those were all terrifying outcomes. She wanted to seek Yi Yun, but she never believed that Yi Yun could cure the root of the problem. From what Yi Yun was able to do to Dong Xiaowan, he could only alleviate the symptoms. Now, with Yi Yun saying that he could cure the plague, the impact it left on Fairy Purple Rain's mind was obvious. Chapter 1183, Alliance.
Translator, Situlin editor, Situlin. Is what you said true? Fairy Purple Rain took a deep breath. She could not hide the quiver in her voice. At the moment when she could not see any inkling of hope, Iyun had suddenly spoken such words. She was afraid that she would end up getting excited about nothing. Of course it's true. In fact, Dong Xiaowan has already completely recovered, said Iyun. She has recovered? Fairy Purple Rain was stunned. However, she had no reason to doubt Iyun. Iyun had come to Myriad City with the intention of roping in the Guiyuan family and other factions as his allies. Of course, he wasn't bluffing. In fact, this was likely the only card he had in his hand. If that was the case, was she about to be cured? She felt like she had finally seen a glimmer of light in the endless darkness. Grandpa. Fairy Purple Rain cast eyes filled with anticipation at Fourth Elder. When Fourth Elder heard Iyun's words, he felt a jolt through his heart. He was somewhat doubtful. He had sought famous doctors from all over but to no avail. Even the patriarch was helpless on this matter. Yet, this youth had used such a nonchalant tone to claim that he could cure the plague. How could anyone easily believe him? However, as long as there was a minute possibility that Iyun was telling the truth, the Guiyuan family would not ignore it. Their young geniuses and all the talented ones had been infected. This was no doubt a serious blow to the Guiyuan family. Iyun's proposal was too alluring. Furthermore, he indeed had the capability to ally with the Paradise chapter at this critical juncture. The various major factions were originally in contention with the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. If they formed an alliance with Iyun, the Guiyuan family would indeed end up reaping the greatest benefits. This made Fourth Elder seriously consider the proposal. Young Master Yi, please wait. Fourth Elder cupped his fists and left the room, leaving Iyun and Fairy Purple Rain behind. Instantly, the room turned silent. Iyun gently held up the teacup. In the amber-colored tea, the tea leaves swirled and emitted a billowing tea fragrance. Iyun was in no hurry and seemed to be completely confident. He knew that Fourth Elder had likely left to discuss the matter with the executive arm of the Guiyuan family. He was not afraid that the Guiyuan family would shrink back. After all, there was no need for him to rely on the Guiyuan family. There were many factions in Myriad Immortal Pavilion that were in contention with the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. After 1 hour, Fourth Elder returned to the room. He glanced at Iyun and said solemnly, I have already informed Patriarch. If you can really cure the Guiyuan family's younger generation of the illness, and form an alliance with the Paradise chapter, or even more factions, then my Guiyuan family is willing to sign a contract with you. There was no need to worry about being betrayed by a friend of a friend, even if they were enemies, with the contract in place. All right. In that case, I'll heal Fairy Purple Rain after the contract is signed, said Iyun. From the looks of it, the Guiyuan family was rather daring and resolute. Although they had a history of overt and covert conflicts with the Myriad Immortal Pavilion, they had never completely abandoned decorum with the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. But by signing a contract with the Myriad Immortal Pavilion's archenemy, Iyun, they were basically acting to completely dissolve whatever relationship they had with the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. The one that was most pleased by this turn of events was Fairy Purple Rain. When Iyun came to treat her, she felt like she was in a dream. Let me cure you. Lie down first, Iyun said after coming inside her room. Fairy Purple Rain hesitated for a moment. As one of the most esteemed daughters of the Guiyuan family, many men attempted to court her. Not only did she never reciprocate, she did not even give them a chance to approach her. But now, in front of Iyun, she did not appear bashful as she laid down for her treatment. Fairy Purple Rain's maidservant was accompanying her by the side. Back when Fairy Purple Rain went to invite Iyun to be their distinguished guest, this maidservant had accompanied her. She once thought that Iyun would be delighted beyond measure, but she never expected him to directly reject her.
She had remarked that Yi Yun did not know what was good for him. But in an ironic twist of fate, Yi Yun had become a valued guest of the Guiyuan family. Even her mistress had to obey his orders and treat him with respect.
Therefore, the maidservant appeared rather embarrassed in front of Yi Yun.
"You can leave the room," Yi Yun said as he took a glance at her. He barely paid the maidservant any mind, so he had no idea that she was feeling an upheaval of emotions.
"Yes," the maidservant replied obediently.
She retreated out of the room before gently closing the doors.
"Just relax," said Yi Yun.
With the experience of helping Dong Xiaowan remove the demonic servant, Yi Yun was already adept at the procedure. In the purple crystal energy vision, he instantly detected the demonic servant hiding in Fairy Purple Rain's dantian. It was in a half-slumber state, but it was suddenly jolted awake when it saw Yi Yun.
It naturally recognized Yi Yun and it was scared out of its wits.
Fairy Purple Rain's body was its best shelter, but to Yi Yun, it was nothing but an empty shell.
"Don't try to put up a meaningless struggle." Yi Yun directly injected the Azure Tree's energy into Fairy Purple Rain's dantian.
Fairy Purple Rain's body quivered slightly. She originally believed that the treatment would be an excruciating process, so why did it feel somewhat comfortable? This feeling that enveloped her left her unable to control herself. Although she knew her entire body was trembling, so much that Yi Yun would definitely sense it, the moment such a thought came to her, Fairy Purple Rain's cheeks were flushed with red.
As for Yi Yun, he was completely focused.
He used the Azure Wood Divine Tree's energy to force the demonic servant out. Immediately, he used a spatial cage to imprison the demonic servant before allowing the Azure Wood Divine Tree to rapidly absorb it. The demonic servant had absorbed a great deal of Fairy Purple Rain's Yuan Qi, but now it was a source of great nourishment for the Azure Wood Divine Tree. Yi Yun rapidly resolved the matter and then looked down at Fairy Purple Rain. Noticing her face so flushed with red, he was immediately taken aback.
Fairy Purple Rain was indeed very pretty. She looked delicate and, if anyone were to see this scene, they would have thought that Yi Yun had done something. It would be something that could not be explained away. "You can get up," said Yi Yun.
Fairy Purple Rain was somewhat puzzled when Yi Yun followed up with the statement, "You are already fine."
Fairy Purple Rain was astonished. That was it? It was that simple.
She originally believed that it would be a long process that would cost Yi Yun a great deal of his mental strength.
She never expected it to be done in less than 5 minutes.
She hurriedly circulated her Yuan Qi to sense her body. Perhaps her dantian had been inactive for too long, but when she suddenly circulated her Yuan Qi, she felt pain in her abdomen. But soon she was delighted to discover that pure Yuan Qi was truly flowing out of her dantian in increasing amounts. This made Fairy Purple Rain completely forget the bit of pain that came from her dantian. After her meridians had been left in a drought for so long, the feeling of being nourished by Yuan Qi once again made her overjoyed. She had really been healed. Only after losing her strength and obtaining it again did she realize how precious it was.
Fairy Purple Rain looked at Yi Yun and felt complete disbelief. The strange illness that had troubled her for so long to the point of despair had been easily cured by Yi Yun's hand. Those famous doctors had been helpless, yet Yi Yun had treated her in such a casual manner. He did not even use any pills or array techniques. Chapter 1184, Heart of the Zither. Translator, Cetulin. Editor, Cetulin. Fairy Purple Rain sat up and got off the bed. She then bowed slightly at Yi Yun and with a voice that sounded like a gentle wind with a flowery fragrance, she said, "Thank you, young Master Yi. I will never forget your act of saving my life." Yi Yun had cured her of the strange illness, which was no different than saving her life. If a warrior could not cultivate and instead deteriorated daily, it was a feeling worse than death. It's all part of the contract. Fairy Purple Rain, there is no need to be so polite, Yi Yun said lightly. He remembered that Fairy Purple Rain had attempted to win him over as a distinguished guest of the Guiyuan family in the past.
However, Yi-yun did not place too much thought on such a minor matter. With young master's medical skills, he will definitely win the hearts of everyone in Myriad City. There's no need for the hearts of people. Myriad runes are more pragmatic. Yi-yun said it nonchalantly, but it took Fairy Purple Rain aback. She knew very well that if Yi-yun used the plague to earn myriad runes and exchanged them for treasures, it would be worth an unimaginable amount of wealth. Of course, one needed sufficient strength to ensure that they could hold on to wealth. Yi-yun lacked the strength, and so had chosen to cooperate with the Guiyuan family and the Paradise chapter. Having those two factions backing him was sufficient. He did not need the rest. As Fairy Purple Rain thought this, she looked Yi-yun deeply in the eye. Although the Guiyuan family had reaped benefits from this deal, it was still being used as a vanguard by Yi-yun. However, the Guiyuan family was happy to do so. Young master, I wonder how much mental strength you expended to cure me of my illness. The other geniuses in my family, a total of 11, have contracted the illness. I wonder if they can be treated, asked Fairy Purple Rain. Oh? Are they seriously ill? Fairy Purple Rain said, my illness was the worst in the family. The rest are just temporarily unable to cultivate and are not feeling weak. Then, let them wait a little longer. I did expend quite a lot of mental strength to treat you. At the moment, I can only treat one person. Yi-yun said nonchalantly. It rendered Fairy Purple Rain somewhat speechless. She could tell that Yi-yun looked extremely vibrant. And the way he cured her of the illness was so extremely casual and simple. Did he really expend quite a lot of mental strength? However, Yi-yun had made the claim, so she did not want to probe any further. She was extremely thankful to Yi-yun, so how could she openly doubt him? Furthermore, the plague was very tricky. Many doctors were helpless to treat it. Yi-yun might have treated the illness easily on the surface, but there was no way to be certain how much mental strength he had truly expended. With this thought in mind, Fairy Purple Rain said, then, I must trouble young Master Yi on this matter. After all, if they are unable to cultivate, it's a loss of precious time. Alright, I will try my best. Yi-yun said lightly. The demonic servants were energy for the Azure Wood Divine Tree's absorption. They nourished him, so how could he find dealing with them a chore? However, if he were to cure every genius of the Guiyuan family in one go, his medical skills would appear worthless. It would also loosen the grip he had on the Guiyuan family. Fairy Purple Rain, I'll be leaving for now. With that said, Yi-yun turned and left. He pushed the door open and walked out. The Guiyuan family's 4 elders were waiting outside, including 4th elder. Fairy Purple Rain's personal maidservant and company were also staring intently. How is my mistress? Asked the worried maidservant. As for the elders, they had already probed with their perceptions the moment the door opened. They expected that Fairy Purple Rain would be lying in bed resting. However, they were surprised to find that Fairy Purple Rain was already walking behind Yi-yun. From the way Fairy Purple Rain looked flushed and radiant, with a powerful vibrancy within her, they were immediately stunned when they went on to probe her dantian. She had been cured just like that? Elders, I will take my leave. I will uphold my side of the contract, and I hope that all of you will too. After Yi-yun said that, his figure flashed as he instantly vanished. He left the elders behind to do all sorts of checks on Fairy Purple Rain. Finally, they confirmed that Fairy Purple Rain had completely recovered. She just needed to rest for a few days and she would reach her peak before the illness. Yi-yun's methods were astonishing. They began to feel that they had made the right move in cooperating with Yi-yun. 4th brother, convene a secret family meeting to discuss this matter. If it's possible, our Guiyuan family might truly reign supreme in the Myriad Divine Territory. An elder's eyes twinkled. After millions of years of endurance, the Guiyuan family had finally accumulated enough to strike back. At that moment, in City Lord Manor's back garden, cherry blossoms were blooming, their pinkness forming a contiguous spectacle that was like the dawn of spring. Two young girls were sitting facing each other in the cherry blossom garden. They were each playing the zither with their slender fingers. Their dresses were flaring up as the zither tunes seemed to speak of lofty goals. It was mentally refreshing. "Miss, you have already played the zither an entire day. Why haven't you eaten the pills sent to you by the city lord?" A maidservant walked over and spoke with a bow. She was Princess White Fox's maidservant. It was as though Princess White Fox did not hear her as she continued playing her zither. As one of the most outstanding elites of Myriad City, Princess White Fox had also been infected by the plague. Due to her immense talent, the effects of the plague were swift. City Lord Cheen had checked Princess White Fox's body and detected the evil entity. However, he was no doctor and, even though he was powerful, he was helpless to save her. He could only find several treasures to strengthen Princess White Fox's lifeblood. However, Princess White Fox began rejecting them after they failed to have any effect. During the days of not being able to cultivate, she chose to sit in a carriage and let her maidservants and guards accompany her to various places as she took in the sights and played her zither. These were things that rich daughters from mortal families enjoyed. Warriors had no interest in them, but Princess White Fox had indulged in them. Soon, Princess White Fox found a confidant in Fairy Yucheen. Fairy Yucheen and Princess White Fox had sparred with each other in the zither several times. Every time, there was no victor determined, or they were disturbed by other matters. Now, that the both of them were gradually feeling weaker, it gave them peace of mind to continue sparring in the zither. During this period of enjoying the sights and playing the zither, Princess White Fox felt a baffling sense of calm. She did not worry over gradually losing her strength and instead immersed herself in her zither tunes. She began appreciating the way of the zither with a mortal's mindset. It was rather miraculous that, although she could not circulate her yuan qi with her dantian, her zither skills did not decrease at all. Instead, they stably improved. She felt that she was close to reaching the heart of the zither, but unfortunately, due to the lack of her cultivation level, she could not make the breakthrough. She vaguely felt that the illness was a test for her. She did not know if she could survive it, but, regardless of the outcome, her heart of the zither did not permit her to shrink back. As Princess White Fox and Fairy Yucheen plucked the last zither string, the piece came to an end, but its tune lingered without end. Oh! Princess White Fox and Fairy Yucheen suddenly felt something as they looked up. They saw an azure-clothed youth walk over from one corner of the garden with a smile. Both fairies truly have impeccable talent in the zither. I enjoyed it greatly. Chapter 1185, Allying with Paradise Chapter. Translator, Seetolan Editor, Seetolan. Yi-Yun, is that you? When he was at the Guiyuan family, Yi-Yun had disguised himself with the Star Transference Heaven-Changing Book, but now he had restored his original looks. Princess White Fox was naturally able to identify him immediately. Upon seeing Yi-Yun, she was astonished but also worried. Yi-Yun, don't you know that the Myriad Immortal Pavilion has offered huge rewards for you? The entire Myriad Divine Territory is looking for you. Why did you come back to Myriad City? Fairy Yucheen looked at Yi-Yun with surprise as well. She vividly recalled Yi-Yun dealing the devastating blow to Si Yushing and matching Zhuobo. She had been present that day, and Yi-Yun's alchemical skills and terrifying strength astounded her greatly. Fairy Yucheen believed that she would never see Yi-Yun again, but here he was back in Myriad City. Furthermore, he had appeared in front of her so suddenly. Young Mastery is truly talented and daring, Fairy Yucheen said. Although she was ill, her words remained exultant and pleasant. She sounded like a beautiful zither tune that lingered around one's ears. Fairy, don't tease me. Yi-Yun nodded at Fairy Yucheen. Then, he said to the both of them, there's no need to talk about the Myriad Immortal Pavilion right now. Wuxia, how's your body? Princess White Fox noticed that Yi-Yun was not concerned about the Myriad Immortal Pavilion at all, and was somewhat surprised. However, with Yun inquiring about her body, she had no choice but to temporarily put the matter aside.
You must have heard of the plague that is wreaking havoc in Myriad City, right?
Both Yu Qin and I have been infected.
Yun, this is not a good time for you to return to Myriad City.
Even forgetting the Myriad Immortal Pavilion, the plague is extremely strange.
It only infects geniuses and it's unknown if it's contagious.
It's extremely dangerous for you to return now, said Princess White Fox with concern.
Thank you for the concern. I'm fine. Yun's heart felt warm. After all, he and Princess White Fox went way back.
Only someone that cared about him would consider the potential of him being infected. In fact, this plague is ineffective against me. Yun glanced at Princess White Fox and Fairy Yoqin's Dantian. The moment the purple crystal's energy vision was activated, the demonic servant in Princess White Fox's Dantian was unable to hide. However, he was rather surprised when he saw Princess White Fox's situation. Be it Dong Xiaowan or Fairy Purple Rain, the demonic servants in their Dantians had absorbed large amounts of Yuan Qi. They would gnash their teeth and become stronger.
However, the demonic servant in Princess White Fox's Dantian appeared to be repressed by Princess White Fox herself.
Although it had been absorbing some of Princess White Fox's Yuan Qi, it had failed to completely entrench and take over Princess White Fox's Dantian. When he looked at the evil spirit within Fairy Yoqin's Dantian, it too was partially under control. However, her situation was a little worse than Princess White Fox's. Yun withdrew his gaze and asked, Wuxia, can you tell me about your situation in detail? Princess White Fox nodded and said, after I was infected, I could no longer cultivate. However, I calmed my heart down and played the zither daily. I used a mortal's heart to appreciate the zither Tao and, from there, I gradually gained enlightenment in the heart of the zither.
It could be considered a silver lining. Oh? That actually happened? Yun was taken aback. Princess White Fox was indeed talented.
From the looks of it, one could repress the evil spirits as long as one's talent reached a certain realm. Furthermore, Princess White Fox had come close to the heart of the zither despite being unable to cultivate. Through this insight, she was able to repress the demonic servant.
There were few things geniuses couldn't turn into an opportunity. The crux of the matter was if one could grasp it or not. As long as one had providence shining down on them and had sufficient strength, any calamity could be transformed into an opportunity.
Young Master Yi, there is no need to worry about me. I can vaguely sense that after gaining insight into the heart of the zither, I can restrain the evil spirit bit by bit. I might even be able to purge it eventually. It might take a rather long time, but I would eventually be free, Princess White Fox said nonchalantly.
This process might take more than a decade or even several decades.
However, Princess White Fox had sufficient confidence and patience. Zither Tao was something that required slow progress. It could not be rushed. Yun studied the speed at which the evil spirit was weakening and could roughly estimate how long it would take. He shook his head and said, "That's too long. It will take at least 30 years. That would be a waste of valuable cultivation time for you."
Although the heart of the zither was important, cultivation levels were more important. To absolute geniuses, their youthful years were extremely precious. It would be quite a pity to waste even half a year. To be delayed 30 years could severely affect their future accomplishments.
There is no other option.
I have to experience it myself. Princess White Fox gave a slight smile.
Fairy Yuqin sighed by the side. Her condition was worse.
Perhaps Princess White Fox could purge the evil spirit in 2 to 3 decades, but she might need 5 decades or even 8. That would really be too long.
If that happened, she would at most progress to the point of the beginning stages of supremacy. Yun said, "Wuxia, I actually have the means to purge the evil spirit within your body, allowing you a full recovery."
Yun's words shocked Fairy Yuqin and Princess White Fox.
Mighty figures had personally checked their condition, and many famous doctors had examined them. They had consumed copious amounts of natural treasures and naturally knew how incurable the illness was.
Iyun could give them a full recovery? Princess White Fox naturally trusted Iyun completely. Since Iyun said he could cure the illness, it meant that he was absolutely capable of doing so. However, Princess White Fox considered for a moment before saying, "Although this illness has harmed me, it has also pushed me to the boundaries of figuring out the heart of the Zither. I cultivate in Zither Dao and in the soul. This illness is a way of hardening myself." Hardening? Iyun felt wistful when he heard such an answer. Only Princess White Fox would continue to maintain such an unperturbed and elegant composure against an illness that left many distraught. Not only did she not wallow in despair, she thought of using this experience to harden herself. Such resolve indeed left others in the dust. How about this? I weaken the evil spirits a little. This way, you can continue hardening yourself, but it will also reduce the time it takes. In half a year or so, you will be able to completely vanquish the evil spirit, said Iyun. It can be weakened? Fairy Yuqin looked at Iyun with her beautiful eyes. Purging the evil entity was already a miracle, but to weaken and not kill it was even more difficult than purging it completely. She felt that Iyun was veiled in mystery. Be it his strength, alchemical skills, or his sudden demonstration of his medical skills, he always left people astounded. Such talent meant that he was a peerless elite. It left elites of the same generation like her to bemoan their own inadequacy in front of him. Iyun, I really do not know how to thank you, Princess White Fox said sincerely. Lin Xintong had once saved her life and now, Iyun had saved her once again, turning this calamity into an opportunity for her. You have never asked for anything in return when you helped me in the past, Iyun said with a gentle smile. Princess White Fox hesitated for a moment before stealing a glance at Fairy Yuqin. She looked back at Iyun and said, Iyun, I have a presumptuous demand. I wonder if. From Princess White Fox's attitude, Iyun knew what she was about to say. Now that she and Fairy Yuqin were close friends, she naturally wanted him to save Fairy Yuqin. She just could not force Iyun to do so. Iyun said with a smile, actually, even if I did not encounter Fairy Yuqin today, I would have gone to Heavenly Treasure's Arch to visit you in the near future. Fairy Yuqin had the Paradise chapter backing her. Alongside the Guiyuan family, Iyun wanted to ally with the Paradise chapter. Young Master Yi, is there something you need from me? Fairy Yuqin asked, puzzled. I will not only cure you but the other geniuses of Paradise chapter that have been infected by the plague, said Iyun. Fairy Yuqin's beautiful eyes blinked as she looked at Iyun with a baffled look. Immediately, she realized something and asked softly, it looks like young Master Yi has some conditions? Fairy Yuqin is truly pure of heart and spirit. Indeed, I do have some conditions. Just as you know, I have a vendetta with the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. My condition is for the Paradise chapter to ally with me by signing a soul contract. We will fight against the Myriad Immortal Pavilion together. And so you know, I just came from the Guiyuan family. I have already signed a soul contract with them, Iyun said calmly. Fairy Yuqin listened in silence before nodding her head slightly. I never expected the Guiyuan family to agree to it. Indeed, be it young Master Yi's ability to treat their geniuses or your future, they demand that one put serious consideration into the matter. However, I still need to inform my master of this matter. I need her to make the decision. Then, I'll be troubling you, said Iyun. Fairy Yuqin immediately took out a specially created voice transmission charm and recorded the details into the charm before sending it out. There was no need to fear that such secretive voice transmission charms would leak out any information. The alliance with the Guiyuan family to deal with the Myriad Immortal Pavilion together was a matter of great importance. The news could not leak. Iyun watched patiently as the flames of the voice transmission charm burned until they extinguished.
He surmised that the Paradise chapter needed at least 2 to 4 hours to discuss the matter. It was even possible that elders from the sect would be sent to probe him before they made a final decision. With regards to this, Yi Yun was in no hurry. At that moment, Fairy Yuqin said, "Young Master Yi, actually, I have an additional request. There is no need for my illness to be completely healed. I too want to gain insights into the heart of the zither with wuxia."
"That is definitely possible," Yi Yun replied outrightly. The two women had firm and resolute hearts.
They would willingly endure the pain of the illness to harden themselves and gain insights. Compared to the duo, Fairy Purple Rain was quite inferior.
Chapter 1186, The Tragic Evil Spirits. Translator, Sitalan Editor, Sitalan.
The news eventually reached the Paradise chapter. It was decided to have Fairy Yuqin's master come personally to sign the contract with Yi Yun. And at that moment, Yi Yun was paying City Lord Qin a visit.
Needless to say, City Lord Qin stood on Yi Yun's side. As such, the combined forces of City Lord Qin, the Paradise chapter, and the Guiyuan family were ready to overpower the Myriad Immortal Pavilion.
"Young Master Yi, the contract has been signed.
Can you treat my disciple's illness?" Fairy Yuqin's master was Perfected Qianhua.
She was a woman whose age could not be discerned. She had a head of silver hair, but her skin had a healthy glow, even more so than a 16-year-old.
There were few women in the upper echelons of Paradise chapter. However, those few were typically pure and noble in their youth. After they got married and had children, they would have an esteemed bearing and stand aloof from the world. After the Paradise chapter received the news, they communicated with the Guiyuan family to confirm Yi Yun's story. However, Perfected Qianhua wanted to witness Yi Yun's abilities in person.
Of course.
Yi Yun looked at Fairy Yuqin and Princess White Fox. "Both of you, please follow me."
Beside the meeting hall, there was a guest room. Yi Yun pushed the door open and entered before he gestured to the two to lie in bed.
"Yi Yun, you mean to treat them together?" City Lord Qin was taken aback.
Although he knew that Yi Yun could subdue the evil spirit, he never expected that he could do it to two people simultaneously.
Was he being too overconfident?
"Young Master Yi, I heard that you're going to weaken the evil spirit instead of purging it completely.
The process will probably be quite complicated.
There is no need to rush Yuqin and wuxia's treatment.
It's better to do them one after the other," Perfected Qianhua said as she stood to the side. She knew that after the evil spirits entered the bodies, they would latch on to the Dantian.
They would even begin vying for the soul of the possessed. Be it the Dantian or the soul, they were extremely important to warriors. Therefore, treating things that ailed those areas required extreme caution to prevent collateral damage. Yi Yun said with a smile, "Senior, you can rest assured."
After Yi Yun said that, he prepared to take action. In order to give the two women privacy, City Lord Qin left the room.
However, Perfected Qianhua did not leave. She was unable to be at ease when it came to her beloved disciple.
Yi Yun did not mind either. He took his place in between Fairy Yuqin and Princess White Fox.
Just as he was about to take action, his brows pricked up slightly. At that moment, he sensed strange movements in Fairy Yuqin and Princess White Fox's dantians.
The two evil spirits had suddenly awoken.
They recognized him and, in their fear, took the initiative to abandon Fairy Yuqin and Princess White Fox. They rushed out of their dantians, each taking one side, hoping to rush out from different sides of the room.
Trying to escape?
Yi Yun snorted coldly as he extended his hands to grab at them. As Yi Yun stretched out his hands, the Azurewood Divine Tree's phantom image manifested behind him. Two tender green veins that were condensed with Taoist charms shot out like divine whips.
Pa! Pa!
The two evil spirits were struck by the Azurewood Divine Tree as they let out two tragic screams. Immediately following that, the Azurewood Divine Tree's veins wrapped around the spirits and pulled them straight back into Yi Yun's hands. Of course, this whole scene was witnessed by perfected Xianhua. She had an extraordinary cultivation level and was able to sense the existence of the evil spirits, but only when she pushed her perception to her limits. If she was not in full concentration, she too would be blind to the existence of the evil spirits. The evil spirits had suddenly escaped at the beginning of the treatment, so how could perfected Xianhua react in time? All she could sense was two cold winds blow. Just as she thought to focus her perception and investigate the matter, it was already too late. The evil spirits had gone quite a distance. But in an instant, Yun employed swift methods to grab onto the two evil spirits. This observational ability and reaction speed, together with Yun's strength, astounded perfected Xianhua. Furthermore, perfected Xianhua was baffled. What were the two evil spirits afraid of? Previously, many famous doctors had diagnosed Fairy Yuqin and Princess White Fox. The evil spirits ignored all of them, and it could be said that they looked at them with contempt. But once Yun came, the evil spirits ran away in fright before he even took action. This meant that Yun did not even need to go through the full process of his treatment. All he needed was to pose before Fairy Yuqin and Princess White Fox, and they would be healed? This was way too ridiculous. Upon realizing this, perfected Xianhua no longer knew what expression to make. What would the alchemists and famous doctors that gave their all but failed think of this matter? Meanwhile, Yun was using the divine tree's veins to restrain the two evil spirits. He raised them in front of him and threw out a few slaps, followed by an incessant beating. Pa! 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 Perfected Xianhua could even hear the sounds of the evil spirits being slapped. Despite having incorporeal bodies, Yun was throttling them as he pleased. The two evil spirits kept screaming until they were close to death. These weren't some evil spirits that left people ashen. They were more like two chickens that had just been slaughtered in preparation of a meal. Perfected Xianhua gaped as she watched this. She was rendered speechless. She could clearly sense the evil spirit's aura rapidly decrease. The sinister and cold aura was no longer a tenth of what it was in the past. And at that moment, Yun produced dozens of marks, sealing them within the evil spirits' bodies. They directly restricted the evil spirit's motion. Following that, he held Yuan Qi in his hands and pressed down on Fairy Yuqin and Princess White Fox's abdomen, sealing the two evil spirits into their dantians. Instantly, a warm energy surged into the two women's bodies, flowing to their limbs. This energy came from the vibrant force of the Azure Wood Divine Tree. It was filled with an immense vitality that could nourish the body and lead to immense comfort. Princess White Fox was fine, but Fairy Yuqin's face suffused a red blush. Tiny drops of sweat seeped out of her forehead. Their bodies that had been suffering a drought for such a long time suddenly received such intense, nourishing energy. It was both comfortable and somewhat stimulating. Yun pressed his hands down on their dantians for 2.5 minutes before he slowly moved them away. The refreshing feeling went from high intensity to a gradual calm. By the time Yun retracted his hands, the feeling left profound significance. It's done. When Yun said that, Fairy Yuqin and Princess White Fox exhaled. They attempted to circulate the energies within their bodies and discovered that they had recovered their energies. However, compared to their peaks, they were still a little weaker. Yun explained, "You'll notice that the sealed evil spirits are still leeching from a small portion of your dantian. It prevents you from using all the strength within your dantian, but that's fine. As long as you cultivate with a peaceful mind and gain insights to the heart of the zither, allowing you to use your willpower and Yuan Qi to refine the evil spirits, this will turn out to be a decent opportunity for the both of you." When Fairy Yuqin heard Yun's words, she did not know how to respond. What did he mean by a decent opportunity? If she could gain insights to the heart of the zither, it would be an immense opportunity for her. She said, "Thank you, young Master Yi. But, without your future help, can this evil spirit recuperate and build up strength, causing another relapse?" Yun shook his head and said, "No, they have been sealed by my energy. Not only are they unable to take over, they can't even escape Fairy Yuqin and Wuxia's Dantian. All they can do is wait to be refined." Upon hearing Yun's mild response, perfected Qianhua and Fairy Yuqin were left speechless. Such a feat was more than 100 times harder than treating an illness. These evil spirits sure had some terrible luck meeting Yun. They had attempted to escape when they saw Yun but ended up being caught. Then, they were forcefully sealed within Fairy Yuqin and Princess White Fox's Dantians and used as a well for improvement. At that moment, the door opened. City Lord Qin and company walked in. City Lord Qin looked at Yun and hurriedly asked, "Young Master Yi, how's the situation?" He did not use his perception to probe. Although he knew Yun was capable and that everything was likely smooth sailing, he was still a little worried. Just as he asked the question, he noticed perfected Qianhua's odd expression. "Qianhua, what happened? Did something go wrong?" "It was very successful," perfected Qianhua said, stunned. Successful was an understatement. She recounted the situation through a voice transmission. City Lord Qin also found it ridiculous when he heard the recount. Yun actually had such ability? "Wuxia, how do you feel?" City Lord Qin asked Princess White Fox. Princess White Fox nodded. "Uncle Qin, indeed, I can cultivate now. Furthermore, I can also sense the evil spirit's existence. I think in less than a year, I can completely refine it and use it to empower my heart of the zither." "Good. That's great." City Lord Qin heaved a sigh of relief and looked at Yun. "Yun, now that the Paradise Chapter, the Guiyuan family, and I are backing you, there should be a plan to attack the Myriad Immortal Pavilion." "What are your plans, exactly?" "Yes, let's discuss the plan. Let's begin with the Grand Alchemical Cum Medical Meet that will be held in 3 months. Yun said as a glimmer flashed in his eyes. Chapter 1187, Skyfire Sacred Hands. Translator, Citulin Editor, Citulin. With the passage of time, more and more renowned doctors and alchemists began congregating in Myriad City. The rewards that Myriad Immortal Pavilion had offered were especially tempting. As the number of people constantly increased in anticipation of the upcoming Grand Alchemical Cum Medical Meet, it also became an opportunity for many doctors and alchemists to make a name for themselves. It was not only the Myriad Immortal Pavilion that needed this event. Many factions in Myriad City anticipated the meet, hoping that a cure would be found for their infected geniuses. Nearly 10,000 doctors and alchemists have come to Myriad City. Aside from the few who enjoy an unwarranted reputation, there are quite a number of true experts. In particular, the most impressive arrivals are from the alchemical and medical immortal sects that have tens of millions of years' worth of heritage. Those that come from these sects are much better than Myriad City's local doctors and alchemists. On a mirror-like lake in City Lord Manor, Princess White Fox played the zither while she informed Yun of the latest news in the city. These days, when he wasn't refining pills, Yun would accompany Princess White Fox, as well as Fairy Yuqin, who frequently visited. The trio would sail over the lake, drinking tea and immersing themselves in zither music. It was the cultivation of both mind and body. As time went on, Yun sensed that the after effects of forcefully breaking through to the Dao Palace realm were nearly remedied. In a few more days, he could attempt to advance towards the second-floor Dao Palace realm. "It doesn't matter who comes," said Yun. If he had not obtained the Divine Alchemist's heritage, he might be somewhat interested in the alchemical methods the alchemical medical immortal sects with deep heritage had. However, he did not think too much of them at present. The Grand Alchemical Cum Medical Meet was only a few days away. As for whether Yun was prepared, he had raised his condition to its peak over the past 3 months. "Is that so? I heard that people from the 9 Cauldron Alchemical sect are coming today. They hail from the Candle Cauldron Divine Territory. I thought we could go if you were interested," Princess White Fox said with a smile.
Oh? Candle Cauldron Divine Territory? Yun had memorized the Divine Alchemist's notes, so he obviously knew of the Candle Cauldron Divine Territory. If the Myriad Divine Territory was said to be the trading center of the Yang God Empyrean Heaven, then the Candle Cauldron Divine Territory would be the alchemist's Mecca of the Yang God Empyrean Heaven. Although the Myriad Divine Territory was filled with great riches due to its unique environment, it did not have anything worth flaunting when it came to ancient heritage. The Myriad Divine Territory's major factions were, in essence, mega-conglomerates. However, the Candle Cauldron Divine Territory was different. It produced all sorts of mystic artifacts and natural treasures. In addition to an alchemical and medical tradition that went back hundreds of millions of years, it had given rise to many alchemist sages and alchemist doctors. Years ago, the Divine Alchemist had a rival from the Candle Cauldron Divine Territory. Clearly, to be considered a rival of the Divine Alchemist, his ability was extraordinary. However, something transpired hundreds of millions of years ago. The Divine Alchemist mentioned in his notes that his rival had also gone to the sinkhole. Perhaps he had long turned to dust and returned to the soil. The Nine Cauldron alchemical sect actually comes from the Candle Cauldron Divine Territory? How well regarded are they in the Candle Cauldron Divine Territory? They are a first-tier faction. There are a few alchemical and medical powerhouses in the Candle Cauldron Divine Territory, and the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect is one of them. Is that so? Yun nodded. He knew that the Candle Cauldron Divine Territory had many reclusive sections. Many of them bested the Immortal Rain sect. However, in the long rivers of time, there were some alchemical and medical sects that suddenly disappeared, their whereabouts unknown. The sects of Candle Cauldron Divine Territory have a long heritage and must think highly of themselves. They actually accepted the Myriad Immortal Pavilion's invitation? I'm not sure about that either. By this point in time, Myriad City's gates were constantly bustling. Many people from the various divine territories flocked to Myriad City for the grand alchemical cum medical meet. The group of people that appeared at this moment were especially unique. The moment these people appeared, they attracted the attention of countless warriors. A large, jade-like lotus leaf descended from the sky. Standing atop it were a few figures that seemed transcendent. Behind them were a few extremely talented children with red lips and white teeth. It's the people from the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect. They really came. News of people from the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect coming to Myriad City had already spread. Upon hearing the murmurs, a man dressed in blue looked down. His gaze was like a torch, as if his eyes contained two dazzling flames. He could stifle someone with a glance. They would feel their bodies prickle in heat as though the tongues of a flame had swept past them. I heard that an alchemist from the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect has cultivated for 3,000 years. His name is Skyfire Sacred Hands, and he has refined 2 wisps of skyfire into his eyes. It has to be him. Skyfire Sacred Hands was renowned even among the warriors far away in Myriad Divine Territory. His alchemical skills were extremely brilliant, and he had high influence in the Candle Cauldron Divine Territory. Countless numbers of people came to him for his services. Now that they could see Skyfire's Sacred Hands in person, they felt that simply catching sight of his eyes made them feel torched by his gaze. It was excruciatingly painful. Indeed, he lived up to his name. The lotus leaf landed, and immediately, a group of people came forward from the city gates. The person leading the group was Zhuoqiubo. As an alchemical elder of the Myriad Immortal Pavilion, he naturally was the one to receive the distinguished figure. And behind him was Si Xiaoyu. If Si Yusheng had not been crippled, Si Xiaoyu would not have had a chance to welcome and receive Skyfire's Sacred Hands. I never expected Skyfire's Sacred Hands to come personally. What an honor! Zhuoqiubo said passionately. Skyfire's Sacred Hands said nonchalantly, I found the symptoms of your city's illness very unique, something that I have never heard of before. I came because of the interest it stirred in me. Is that so? Zhuoqiu both secretly nodded. If not for that, why would Skyfire's Sacred Hands come personally? Welcome Skyfire's Sacred Hands, Si Xiaoyu said with a bow. He took a glance at Skyfire's Sacred Hands and seemed to get an inkling of hope from him. Whenever he thought of his illness, Si Xiaoyu felt extremely downtrodden. For the past 3 months, his illness had turned for the worse. Furthermore, Yi Yun had not appeared. It was possible that he had shirked away in fear. However, the main goal of the Grand Alchemical Medical Meet was to find a capable doctor that could treat the plague. As for capturing Yi Yun, that was only a bonus to Si Xiaoyu. Now, with Skyfire's Sacred Hands from the 9 Cauldron Alchemical sect here, Si Xiaoyu only wished to be given a diagnosis immediately. Oh? You are infected too? Skyfire's Sacred Hands could tell at a glance that Si Xiaoyu was lacking in Yuan Qi. His breathing was also shallow, as though he was seriously ill. Si Xiaoyu beamed as he immediately said, "Yes. I'm Si Xiaoyu from the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. I have been infected for more than half a year. I wonder if it's possible for Sacred Hands." "There's no rush." Skyfire's Sacred Hands cut him off. "Since the Grand Alchemical Medical Meet is close, I will naturally give a diagnosis at the meet." "About that." Si Xiaoyu's eyes flashed a look of disappointment. "Sacred Hands, that is so? You did come from afar, after all, and do not understand the details of the plague. I can explain it to you in more detail." He yearned for the Grand Alchemical Medical Meet to be held immediately, for he did not wish for his illness to last even a second longer. Chapter 1188, Grand Meet begins. Translator, Situlin Editor, Situlin. In the following days, Yi Yun continued to spend his time at the lake that resembled a mirror, listening to zither music and drinking tea. It was a carefree and leisurely life. One day, Princess White Fox, who was beside Yi Yun, suddenly stopped playing her zither. Her fingers froze as she looked to the edge of the lake. "Uncle Qin." City Lord Qin gave a loud laugh before he appeared in front of the boat. "Both of you sure are carefree. Have you forgotten that today's the Grand Alchemical Medical Meet?" "Not really." Yi Yun stood up and asked, "City Lord Qin, is everything prepared?" City Lord Qin's eyes flashed acutely. His jovial smile held a tinge of killing intent. "I have finished my discussions with the Guiyuan family and the Paradise chapter. This Grand Alchemical Medical Meet will definitely be a truly grand meet," City Lord Qin said as he looked at Yi Yun. "Are you going as well?" "Of course." Yi Yun nodded. Aren't you afraid of being recognized? The Myriad Immortal Pavilion might capture you right then and there." City Lord Qin, rest assured. "I have long made the necessary preparations." As Yi Yun spoke, his appearance and height instantly started to shift. At first, it was subtle, but in a blink of an eye, he had transformed into a nondescript middle-aged man. City Lord Qin was marveled by this sight. "If not for me seeing it with my own eyes, I would not be able to recognize you, even if you were in front of me. This disguise technique is truly all-encompassing. It's not just the effects of my disguise. Over the past few days, I have refined a reborn pill. I accomplished this effective disguise by using the pill in conjunction with my disguise technique," Yi Yun said with a smile. Azure Yan Lord's Star Transference Heaven-Changing book was extremely thorough, to begin with. Even people a lot stronger than him would not be able to notice anything amiss. Then there was the reborn pill that Yi Yun found in the Divine Alchemist's notes. Consuming it not only allowed him to change his looks and voice, it even altered his soul and aura. The two combined made for a flawless disguise. "City Lord Qin, I'm curious how the people participating in the meet compare to you when it comes to discernment?" Don't worry. If I can't see through your disguise, then the others will definitely not be able to see through it. The Myriad Immortal Pavilion's Pavilion Lord only has a cultivation level similar to mine.
As for the 9 Cauldron alchemical sect master, he is unfathomably strong, but there is no way that he will be there. Therefore, there's no need to be worried about attending the meet. Yi Yun nodded. He had transformed in front of City Lord Qin to verify the effectiveness of his disguise. Young Master Yi, with your new looks, you can accompany me as a foreign doctor. We can describe you as someone my master sent over. Princess White Fox said with a smile. Yi Yun nodded. All right. In that case, let's set off. We shouldn't keep the others waiting too long. City Lord Qin remarked with deep undertones. The Grand Alchemical Cum Medical Meet, a product of half a year's preparations, finally began. The meet was hosted by the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. The Myriad Immortal Pavilion covered a huge area in the core districts of Myriad City. It was a tall, opulent building with a vast square in front of it. On the day of the meet, Myriad City became empty, for nearly everyone went to the square. The square alone could hardly accommodate so many people. However, the Myriad Immortal Pavilion had thought ahead and prepared an artifact that contained a small world within it. It was an otherwise useless artifact, with only the sole ability of accommodating a pocket world. However, the meet was the perfect opportunity for it to be used. Those that walked into the square would pass through a light screen that surrounded the square, which would automatically send them into a tiny world. At the center of the tiny world was a stage. Like a garden, there were many pavilions provided for the guests from the various major factions. Ordinary warriors could only stand far away. On one side of the stage, a middle-aged man with a somewhat heavy gaze and deep, abyss-like aura was seated on a tall structure. He looked up slightly and watched City Lord Qin and Princess White Fox arrive on a chariot. He smiled and commented, "City Lord Qin, you have come too. This grand meet involves so many of Myriad City's geniuses. As Myriad City's City Lord, how can I miss it?" City Lord Qin said with a loud and clear voice. His voice barely faded before he and Princess White Fox were atop the tall structure. "Don't you agree, Pavilion Lord C?" City Lord Qin said as he faced the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man was none other than Myriad Immortal Pavilion's Pavilion Lord. Ian took a deep breath as his eyes briefly met the middle-aged man's. He had a lanky figure and somewhat darkened skin. He had a genial smile hanging from his face, but his eyes seemed to hide a sharp blade. Naturally. Pavilion Lord C nodded. He did not hover his gaze on Ian for too long before he cast it on Princess White Fox off to City Lord Qin's side. He had a sharp perception and could instantly sense the weakness within her. Clearly, the evil spirit was still in her body. Who knew that City Lord Qin would also be helpless against these evil spirits? Then, today's Grand Alchemical Cum Medical Meet might find a cure for Fairy Wuxia. If that time comes, City Lord Qin might even need to thank me. He believed that City Lord Qin had come to seek a cure for Princess White Fox. Is that so? In fact, I brought an alchemist with me here today, replied City Lord Qin. Pavilion Lord C gave a cursory glance at the middle-aged man standing beside Princess White Fox. He looked completely unextraordinary, so Pavilion Lord C thought nothing of him. From the looks of it, he was just some random alchemist that City Lord Qin brought along. This alchemist. I thought you would bring Yi Yun here. As Pavilion Lord C spoke, his eyes flashed with a cold glimmer. The moment he said that, the mood turned slightly colder. Yi Yun was an extremely prominent name. Everyone knew that the Myriad Immortal Pavilion's vendetta with Yi Yun could not be resolved. Yet, Pavilion Lord C had suddenly mentioned him under such circumstances. It left the people present somewhat dazed. It was common knowledge that City Lord Qin had previously sided with and protected Yi Yun. For that, City Lord Qin and the Myriad Immortal Pavilion's relationship had suffered. However, that was something that could be put aside. On the surface, everyone acted amiably. However, Pavilion Lord C had suddenly mentioned Yi Yun, clearly meaning to take City Lord Qin down a notch. The atmosphere turned somewhat awkward, however. City Lord Qin only pricked up his eyebrows but remained silent.
Ha 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 ha.
Pavilion Lord C suddenly laughed loudly. I was only joking.
Why the face? Did you take it seriously, City Lord Qin? I know that you have once been fooled by that punk.
And no matter how much guts that punk has, there is no way he would dare to come to this meet. He'd be seeking his death.
City Lord Qin, don't worry. I won't dwell on the tiny quarrels of the past. Come, City Lord Qin, let's toast and put this matter behind us.
As Pavilion Lord C spoke, he raised his wine cup. Anyone who saw this gesture knew that Pavilion Lord C was giving City Lord Qin a warning. He was warning him not to meddle in affairs involving Yi Yun and, at the same time, reminding him that the Myriad Immortal Pavilion was the true overseer of Myriad City. City Lord Qin, on the other hand, was just a name.
We shall see.
Qin Zhangyang revealed a smile that had deep underlying tones as he raised his cup and downed the wine.
Those witnessing the scene had different interpretations of what it meant.
From the looks of it, City Lord Qin had compromised. Indeed, the Myriad Immortal Pavilion was now of great importance. It had organized the Grand Alchemical cum Medical Meet, pushing its reputation to the limit. Furthermore, every faction in Myriad City needed the Myriad Immortal Pavilion's help. They hoped that the meet would save their juniors. City Lord Qin was no exception.
City Lord Qin had no choice but to compromise to treat Princess White Fox.
As the people pondered over the matter, they had bittersweet feelings. If the Grand Alchemical cum Medical Meet were to succeed in finding a cure for the plague, the Myriad Immortal Pavilion would end up in the spotlight.
It would become the absolute #1 faction in Myriad City. After the toast, the Zhou family, the Guiyuan family, and the Paradise chapter arrived.
Fairy Purple Rain did not make a public appearance, instead staying inside her carriage. As for Fairy Yu Qin, she had come together with perfected Xianhua. They sat across from City Lord Qin and Princess White Fox. One after another, people from the various major factions arrived. At that moment, Pavilion Lord C raised his wine cup again and said, "From the way I see it, not only has City Lord Qin brought an alchemist, but everyone has sought out numerous alchemists and renowned doctors, inviting them here.
It's good that everyone has a chance to try and produce a cure. Our collective efforts will lead to benefits for everyone."
However, the ones we shall look most forward to at this Grand Alchemical cum Medical Meet are the experts from Candle Cauldron Divine Territory's various large alchemical sacred sections. As Pavilion Lord C spoke, the people from the alchemical sacred sects appeared.
One of them stood on a lotus leaf. It was running parallel to the ground and appeared inside a pavilion. Oh! That's the lotus leaf of the Dustless Lotus?
There were many alchemists present, so there were quite a few people who recognized the lotus leaf under the feet of the 9 Cauldron alchemical sect entourage.
What's Dustless Lotus? Some people asked blankly. Not every alchemist was extremely knowledgeable. Dustless lotuses are incredibly rare.
I even thought it went extinct. The dustless lotus is a natural treasure grown through all sorts of lucky coincidences at the brink of a world's destruction.
Typically, a world that faces destruction would be in complete chaos, with lava and earthquakes everywhere.
There would be poisonous miasma and, deep in the cracks of the land, apocalyptic fumes would spew.
However, that exact environment is where dustless lotus can grow and remain unspeckled.
The lotus leaves are a luxuriant green and the lotus flowers are filled with moisture.
That is how the dustless lotus gets its name. An aged alchemist explained.
The origins sounded miraculous.
Above the dustless lotus leaf, a red-dressed girl heard the discussion.
The corner of her mouth curved. I never expected these hillbillies to be so knowledgeable and recognize a dustless lotus.
So, they aren't just good at doing business.
Yuer, why do you speak like that? Although our 9 Cauldron alchemical sect has a long heritage, do not belittle the able minds of the outside world or you will only suffer. Standing in front of the red-dressed girl, a man rebuked her with a frown. His eyes were flickering red. He was none other than Skyfire's Sacred Hands. Yes, Martial Uncle. I spoke without thinking. The red-dressed girl stuck her tongue out. Although she verbally agreed, the lesson clearly did not get into her head. Skyfire's Sacred Hands shook his head. He knew the young disciples of Nine Cauldron Alchemical Sect were all extremely arrogant. However, they were indeed the top geniuses in the sect, especially in the field of alchemy. With the Nine Cauldron Alchemical Sect's long lineage and heritage techniques, no one impressed them.
Chapter 1189, Jade Flame Immortal Orchid. Translator, Cetulan Editor, Cetulan.
The Nine Cauldron Alchemical Sect became the focus of attention the moment it arrived. Pavilion Lord C also went forward to personally welcome them. As the organizer of the Grand Alchemical Medical Meet, Pavilion Lord C felt a sense of pride for being able to get the Nine Cauldron Alchemical Sect to actually show up. He knew that, although the Myriad Immortal Pavilion was extremely rich, it was at times belittled by sects with long histories, considered as nothing more than a mere company.
For the Nine Cauldron Alchemical Sect to attend the meet, it could be taken as a form of acknowledgement of the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. A faction needed to grow and mature step by step.
Similarly, a long heritage needed time to accumulate.
Perhaps in the future, the Myriad Immortal Pavilion would become an Empyrean or Immortal sect with a deep heritage, earning the respect and admiration of others. Of course, it would need to start by being in full control of the Myriad Divine Territory.
Skyfire's Sacred Hands, I am truly honored by your appearance here and your gracious presence. I organized this Grand Alchemical Medical Meet in order to resolve Myriad City's plague. I'll be completely relying on Sacred Hands. In addition, I have brought some alchemists from my sect here with me, hoping to gain some pointers and advice from you.
Pavilion Lord C said as he cupped his fists.
Pavilion Lord C, I came to this meet in order to resolve this plague. Simultaneously, I have brought some juniors to give them some experiential training, Skyfire Sacred Hands said lightly.
Soon, the members of the Nine Cauldron Alchemical Sect were led to seats of honor.
Immediately following that, a bevy of female attendants with excellent figures brought out plates of fruit, spirit food, and fine wine, placing them on the table in front of the Nine Cauldron Alchemical Sect.
The Myriad Immortal Pavilion was a rich sect, so every plate held top-grade spirit fruits or ambrosia.
Such delicacies could not be afforded by ordinary warriors. Not only did these dishes have fabulous flavors, but just one meal was enough to match years of arduous cultivation. I never expected this Myriad Immortal Pavilion to serve an actually decent meal.
Unfortunately, they don't seem to know that this purple dragon fruit should not be eaten directly.
Instead, it should be dabbed in spirit heart dew. That way, it will taste even sweeter and more fragrant. Also, it will release all the essence of purple dragon fruit itself, which is very beneficial to the body.
Nouveau riche are indeed nouveau riche. What a waste of such good items.
The red-dressed girl held a purple dragon fruit and shook her head while saying this to her senior brother. Her senior brother appeared to be in his 20s. He was dressed in a long purple robe. His eyes were bright and he had straight teeth. Strangely, both of his hands had 6 fingers each, for a total of 12 fingers. Furthermore, all 12 of these fingers were long and slender like a woman's. He replied, "Junior sister Yuer, purple dragon fruit and spirit heart dew are rare to begin with.
So how would they know to combine the two together? Just eat it silently."
After all the spirit food for the Nine Cauldron Alchemical Sect had been served, the female attendants served spirit food to the alchemists and herbalists of the other factions. However, the quality of that spirit food was a lot worse.
There were 10,000 alchemists and doctors present.
It was impossible to serve everyone with top-grade spirit food as it would cost too much.
Even the Myriad Immortal Pavilion could not afford it. As such, the treatment the Nine Cauldron Alchemical Sect received stood out.
The other alchemists, doctors, and even a number of relatively unknown ones were not given a seat. They ended up being drowned in the crowd. The preferential treatment the Myriad Immortal Pavilion gave displeased many alchemists. One such young man sat beside Yi Yun. He came from the Paradise chapter. Although Yi Yun was an alchemist invited by Princess White Fox, his status did not earn him any special treatment from the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. In terms of seating, he was placed with the other ordinary alchemists. What the heck? The Myriad Immortal Pavilion has only invited us here to play second fiddle. From the beginning, they've only been placing their hopes on the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect. We are just here to make up the numbers. How disgusting. Upon hearing the young alchemist grumble, Yi Yun smiled. The young man looked like he had cultivated for a few centuries. An alchemist of a few hundred years old was already pretty good compared to ordinary warriors. Of course, the disguised Yi Yun looked a lot older on the surface. How should I address you? You don't look familiar. The young alchemist noticed Yi Yun. Lin Yun. Yi Yun replied casually. He used Lin Xintong's surname. So it's Alchemist Lin. Did you come by invitation of my Paradise chapter? My name is Zhang Xiaotian. I grew up in the Paradise chapter. As Zhang Xiaotian spoke, he picked up a spirit fruit and chomped on it as though he was venting his anger on the fruit. He had quite a frank character and plainly wore his emotions on his face. In fact, among the 10,000 alchemists and herbalists present, there were many that shared the same sentiments as he. Warriors were all proud. Alchemists and herbalists were basically warriors with special expertise, so they were even more prideful. They always enjoyed a lofty existence. Countless people would beseech their services. Even a lesser alchemist would be fawned over and desired by small sects. They had, of course, heard of the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect and the Candle Cauldron divine territory. Indeed, both of them had a storied history in alchemy, but one cannot always trust what they hear. They must see it with their own eyes. Many of the alchemists were unconvinced and wanted to probe the supposedly high-level sect. After a few rounds of wine, the mood became a lot more vibrant. An elder from the Guoyuan family suddenly stood up and said, "Everyone. I'm Guoyuan Jun from the Guoyuan family. I would like to ask Pavilion Lord C a question. You previously mentioned that you invited the masters from the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect to advise the young alchemists of the Myriad Immortal Pavilion. I wonder if an old person like me can be given some advice?" The elder spoke with a slow tone which sounded humble and polite. Pavilion Lord C nodded and naturally did not reject it. "What question do you have? Feel free to ask." "I would like to ask Skyfire's sacred hands, out of all spirit herbs, there is a renowned herb known as the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid. It has many effects, and direct consumption can result in the increasing of one's cultivation level. It would also be very beneficial to one's physique and lifeblood. Unfortunately, trying to infuse its essence into a pill is impossible. I wonder if Skyfire's sacred hands knows of any solutions to this problem?" Guoyuanjin enunciated his words slowly with his eyes flickering. Jade Flame Immortal Orchid could not be infused into a pill because it was fire elemental by nature. It contained an extremely volatile fire elemental Yuan Qi which would burn the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid to ash once it made contact with alchemical flames. But in fact, many years ago, Guoyuanjin had chanced upon a method of infusing Jade Flame Immortal Orchid into pills. First, he switched from fire refinement to water refinement. Secondly, he used Desolate Heaven techniques to prepare the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid ahead of time. As such, he was able to barely extract a third of the medicinal essence of the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid. Being able to accomplish this was quite an impressive feat. Guoyuanjin already knew the answer. He was not seeking advice from Skyfire's sacred hands, but sought to test him instead. He knew that the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect had a deep heritage in alchemy, something that his Guoyuan family could match. However, no matter how great the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect was, they couldn't be invincible in every aspect. The Jade Flame Immortal Orchid alone had taken him 100 years of study. He believed that no one else was more of an expert than him when it came to this herb. After all, there were so many herbs available to an alchemist. Very few people would waste so much effort on one herb. Gui Yuanjun only wanted to use it to take the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect down a notch. Chapter 1190, Bedrock. Translator, Situlin Editor, Situlin. The moment Gui Yuanjun posed his question, all focus shifted to him. Among the alchemists present, there were many who knew of Gui Yuanjun. He was rather famous in the Myriad Divine Territory and had used his skills in the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid to earn quite a sizable fortune. He had managed to refine 3 pills using the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid. The first 2 were made with pill recipes that already existed. With one recipe, he replaced a particular herb with Jade Flame Immortal Orchid, causing its effects to double. The third pill was an original invention of Gui Yuanjun. He had named it the Jade Orchid Jinyuan pill, and it was his secret specialty. This Gui Yuanjun. I thought he would truly ask for advice, but he's just trying to slap the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect in the face, an alchemist who was familiar with Gui Yuanjun said with a laugh. They all knew Gui Yuanjun's background. Ha ha! What Brother Gui Yuan said is to my liking. These people from the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect are way too flashy, especially those juniors. It's like their noses are so high up in the air that one could see straight to their brains. Just a few moments ago, they completely disrespected us and treated us like hillbillies. That's right, our Myriad Divine Territory's alchemical skills and Desolate Heaven technique have been developed over many years. It has already become systemic and is probably not that inferior to the Nine Cauldron alchemical sects. As people spoke, they looked at Skyfire's sacred hands, waiting for him to answer the conundrum. Skyfire's sacred hands drank a cup of spirit tea and continued having the bowl in his hand. The moment the question was raised, he had guessed the situation from the reactions of the other alchemists. Gui Yuanjun clearly knew the answer and was trying to make things difficult for him, embarrassing him in the process. Although Skyfire's sacred hands was opposed to his disciples being overtly arrogant, the truth was that he only wanted them to refrain from verbal disrespect. When it came to arrogance, how could he, a disciple of the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect, not be arrogant? In the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect's history, it had produced 2 alchemical sages. Back then, the Nine Cauldron alchemical sect was celebrated throughout the entire Yang God Emperor in heaven. As for the heritage of the 2 alchemical sages, they were handed down fully intact. He himself had inherited his knowledge from one of the alchemical sages, Thousand Hand alchemical sage. Seeing this alchemist from the Myriad Divine Territory trying to test him, Skyfire's sacred hands smiled nonchalantly. He did not even feel like answering. How could the Thousand Hand alchemical sage's heritage be something mere pedestrian alchemists would comprehend? He would not use it to compete with others, as that would be an insult to the Thousand Hand alchemical sage. Therefore, Gui Yuanjun's sudden question had displeased Skyfire's sacred hands. He gently placed the bowl down, turned to the 6-fingered youth, and said, "How are you answer him?" The moment this was said, all the alchemists of the Myriad Divine Territory frowned. Gui Yuanjun had asked Skyfire's sacred hands a direct question, but Skyfire's sacred hands ignored him and delegated the response to his disciple? Skyfire's sacred hands had cultivated for 3,000 years while Gui Yuanjun had cultivated for more than 100,000 years. However, in the field of alchemy, the able were the teachers. Gui Yuanjun did not dare to think himself as a senior to Skyfire's sacred hands. By politely asking a question, he had gone through the necessary niceties. It wasn't an important question, but by delegating the answer to a junior, Skyfire's sacred hands revealed how little he thought of the alchemists of this city. "Yes, martial uncle." The 6-fingered youth stood up and said. He cupped his fist and said, "Senior, I'm curious if your master ever told you that to ask a question, you must first ask if it is correct or not before asking for the reason?" "Oh."
Gui Wanjun's expression sunk. What do you mean? Senior, you said that Jade Flame Immortal Orchid cannot be infused into a pill. However, my opinion is that this statement itself is invalid. The medicinal essence of Jade Flame Immortal Orchids is indeed a little volatile and will easily reduce to ash in a cauldron, but as long as this problem is resolved, the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid can be easily infused into a pill. Senior, why do you say that it's impossible to infuse its essence into a pill? The six-fingered youth spoke with ease and fluency. Although he sounded polite, there was an overbearing tone to his words. Gui Wanjun was enraged. He had spent 100 years researching the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid, but a junior had dismissed him with a single sentence. Was the 100 years he spent a joke? Heroes indeed come from the young since time immemorial. I have finally witnessed it today. Alright, you say that the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid can be easily infused into a pill, then broaden my horizons and show me how to infuse it. Gui Wanjun's voice carried some agitation. This was his specialty, the thing he was best at. How could he not be angered after being belittled by a junior? The alchemists present nodded in agreement. The six-fingered youth had indeed been arrogant in his words. They had personally confirmed that Jade Flame Immortal Orchid could not be infused into pills. Even in large sects, the methods of handling Jade Flame Immortal Orchid were definitely not as simple as the six-fingered youth made it out to be. Junior sister, since they would like to see Jade Flame Immortal Orchid being infused into pills, why don't you do the demonstration? As people were waiting for the six-fingered youth to demonstrate his skills, he sat down abruptly. He had passed the mission to the red-dressed girl beside him. Upon seeing this happen, the alchemists present were incensed. From her looks, she had cultivated for less than 2 centuries. Yet, she too knew how to infuse Jade Flame Immortal Orchid into a pill? The elderly shoved the load to the old, while the old shoved it to the young. They truly did not think much of them. Alright. TCH, isn't it just a Jade Flame Immortal Orchid? The red-dressed girl said contemptibly. With a tap of her toes, her graceful figure landed in the middle of the square like an agile red sparrow without stirring so much as a speck of dust. Who has a Jade Flame Immortal Orchid? Let me use it. I can't be expected to carry such herbs around with me. Fine. Very fine indeed. Upon hearing the contempt in the red-dressed girl's words, Gui Wanjun was further infuriated. The herb that he had spent so much time researching was thought so little of by her. I have one here. Gui Wanjun threw a red herb at the red-dressed girl. She caught it casually and took out a cauldron. Do it soundly without fuss. Just infuse it into the pill and don't be too ostentatious. At that moment, Skyfire's Sacred Hands' voice transmission rang in her ears. Yes, Martial Uncle. The red-dressed girl curved the ends of her mouth. However, the moment she began, Skyfire's Sacred Hands knew that she had not heeded his words. The red-dressed girl had deliberately opened the mouth of the cauldron, allowing everyone to see the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid's refinement process. It was an action not typically done by alchemists. Skyfire's Sacred Hands shook his head but did not say anything. Since these people had doubted the 9 Cauldron alchemical sect's heritage, they needed to be enlightened. If they weren't, they would continue to be frogs in the well, thinking that their alchemical skills were peerless. She actually opened the mouth. This will result in the array within the cauldron to be a little incomplete. It will make the refinement of the medicinal essence even harder. What arrogance! The alchemists present gave their commentary, which the red-dressed girl ignored. She said, since it's the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid, let me refine a Jade Spirit Pill. As the red-dressed girl spoke, an icy blue flame emerged in her palm. When the flame burned, it did not have any heat to it. Instead, it effused a coldness. The red-dressed girl casually flicked her finger, sending the flame into the cauldron. Following that, she threw the Jade Flame Immortal Orchid in. Her fingers began to move as she produced seals at a rapid pace. These seals surrounded the jade flame immortal orchid, imprinting themselves deep within it. As such, the jade flame immortal orchid was slowly enveloped by the icy blue flame.
Through the mouth of the cauldron, people were able to see the refinement process of the jade flame immortal orchid clearly. Strangely, when the jade flame immortal orchid was enveloped by the flame, it did not seem to heat up.
Instead, a thin layer of frost formed on its surface.
The frost layer grew thicker until it completely covered the jade flame immortal orchid. From what the crowd could see, it was like a piece of ice burning within a cauldron. After about 15 minutes, a marvelous scene occurred. The jade flame immortal orchid that was sealed in ice began melting slowly within.
After another 5 minutes, the jade flame immortal orchid melted into a pale red liquid. It was crystalline and shimmered.
Being sealed in ice, it looked extremely beautiful.
It seemed that the red-dressed girl's process of herbal essence extraction was a great success.
It was even more complete than the extraction process Gui Wanjin had figured out.
How? How is this possible? Is it that simple?
Just let it burn in the fire directly. Why is this fire so icy cold?
Gui Wanjin muttered. Jade flame immortal orchid possessed an extremely volatile fire elemental attribute.
It exploded upon contact with fire, but the red-dressed girl had used a flame that effused an icy cold aura to seal the volatile herbal essence in ice.
She actually had such a flame? I know.
That's extreme frost ice flame.
There are records and books of it. It's a spiritual flame born in the core regions of an ice mountain for hundreds of millions of years.
It is formless and traceless, making it extremely difficult to find.
You actually have such a flame?
Gui Wanjin suddenly said as though he had lost his soul.
The red-dressed girl had produced the extreme frost ice flame the moment she was asked to demonstrate her skills?
He had only seen records of such a flame in books, and this was the first time seeing it in person.
At least you are knowledgeable.
Yes, it's the extreme frost ice flame.
This extreme frost ice flame is indeed hard to come by. It wasn't easy, even for my 9 Cauldron alchemical sect, to obtain.
However, the ancestors of my 9 Cauldron alchemical sect have alchemical sages. One found an ice mountain as big as a star in an extremely cold land that had been sealed in ice for 1 billion years. He bored right to the ice mountain's core and spent decades seeking a lantern of extreme frost ice flame.
Extreme frost ice flame is not a lone flame.
Although obtaining one is rare, it has a special attribute of being able to nurture more. With a mother flame, child flames can be nurtured. Extreme frost ice flame's mother flame has been nurtured in my 9 Cauldron alchemical sect for tens of millions of years.
It is controlled by the Grand Elder.
Although the flame I have is a child flame produced from the mother flame, it's still enough to refine a jade flame immortal orchid. Therefore, when you mentioned that jade flame immortal orchid cannot be infused into pills, it left me puzzled.
Why can't it be infused? Isn't it very simple?
The red-dressed girl countered with a question.
Her smile made Gui Wanjin's face flush red.
He pointed at the red-dressed girl but could not say a word. What else could he say? He had gone through countless experiments before chancing upon a method to infuse jade flame immortal orchids into pills. Yet, his life's work had become a joke in the eyes of others.
That was the underlying bedrock a super refinement sect established itself upon.
To them, such things did not need researching.
It was easily resolved with the knowledge stemming from the bedrock. Extreme frost ice flame. As long as one was a core disciple, one would obtain an extreme frost ice flame. So how hard could it be to infuse the jade flame immortal orchid into a pill? Just sealing the volatile fire elemental attribute in ice would do.